If you're not weird, you're not noticed. This aphorism could not have been better suited to describe Emily Lisova. At first sight, she made an impression of an unusual young person. Bright appearance, confident look, model gait. But it was worth getting to know her better, as it became clear that in addition to the shiny wrapper was not quite standard content, a personality prone to unexpected and even marginal actions. With her, people felt like they were on a powder keg. She could pull a stunt at any moment and then deal with the consequences. Everybody got hit. She was hit by a car with her temper. Rarely anyone could stand to hang out with her for more than a week, and even her old friends took weeks to overdose on her eccentricity. "Oh, Emily, you and I are going to get into trouble," Ashley would say from time to time, either jokingly or seriously. Ashley was one of her few regular friends. The rest were occasional visitors and, consequently, quick to leave. "You're going to get us into a nunnery. And Ashley, you're an idiot. We only live once," said Emily, laughing. "To die. So to die with music, to rob, so to rob the bank, to love the king. If you live like a gray mouse and fear even your own shadow, then what is the point of such an existence? What will you remember later, when you're at the end of your years? And if in the next world they start replaying, like movies, episodes of your life, they will die of boredom and say, 'And this is called that you lived.' But okay, life is not a road." And Ashley was interested in freedom too. "The cops will take you away for your shenanigans, and me along with you, for goodness sake, as an accomplice. And no one's going to know that I was just unlucky enough to be your so-called friend. Their logic is simple. If you were standing next to me, you were an accessory. You can't be safe from prison." Emily waved off the idea that life was a game, and we were all actors in it. "If you think about it that way, it's better to stay at home and stay out of sight. What if a brick falls from the roof and cracks you on the head? Is that a possibility? Of course there is. So stay at home, covered with a blanket, and be afraid of every rustle, especially under the bed." Bumblebee. Ashley didn't say anything. She was used to Emily's extravagant style of communication and humor. Many people were shocked and repulsed by it, but Ashley had developed an immunity to it, so she could easily tolerate her friend's numerous jokes. But unfortunately, words weren't enough. Emily was constantly drawn to adventure, and she was like a magnet attracting trouble and rushing toward it. Like the kitten named Gav in the Soviet cartoon of the same name, "Don't go there. There is trouble waiting for you." But how can you not go there? They're waiting. This succinct two-line quote summarized Emily's life credo. For his tendency to adventure, Emily once paid the price. She liked to live beautifully, on a wide leg, and money for all the desires she, of course, constantly lacked. Therefore, Emily had to spin like a squirrel in a wheel and go to all sorts of tricks. For example, she did not disdain to steal in large stores and markets, where it was possible, lingering in the crowd to take away various small things. Ashley was well aware of all her friends' shenanigans and constantly discouraged her from such a way of life, but her words were like water off a goose. Soon Ashley realized that it was a thankless task, so she gave up on her friend. It's her life, so let her do what she wants with it. You're not a little girl, Emily. You'll be caught stealing someday, and then you'll know where the crawfish are. There'll be an end to it, Ashley urged her friend for the umpteenth time. Oh, Ashley, you're always grumbling like an old woman. Emily rolled her eyes to the sky, showing how much she was sick of her friend's advice. Ashley, do you feel sick? I'm not forcing you to do this, so don't, my dear. Relax. Enjoy yourself. Being your accomplice and covering up crimes is a very dubious pleasure, Ashley said. Don't tell me how to live my life. Just help me out financially. And if you can't help me, at least don't stop me from living the way I like. I don't want to interfere with your life with my advice. I might if I had a temper like yours. You can never pass by without making some unwarranted judgment. I'll figure it out without you telling me what to do. So save your advice for your future children. When you have kids, you'll be the one to set them on the right path. Every single day from morning till night. And if you like, you can read them a story instead of a story all night long. In vain, Emily wasted her efforts. All the exhortations and warnings of her only friend were ignored by Caitlin and passed by her ears. She continued her reckless behavior. But one day, Caitlin had gotten her hands on something too valuable. She decided to steal dresses from an expensive boutique that she didn't have the money for. However, her plan failed because the boutique had not only security guards but also surveillance cameras, including hidden ones. Caitlin acted according to the usual scheme. She brought a bunch of different things to the fitting room and carefully removed one of the dresses from the hanger, hiding it among the things she had brought. Then she put this dress under her clothes and went out, behaving nonchalantly. The number of hangers left in the fitting room matched the number of clothes left there. However, As she crossed the exit of the store with a confident gait, she said, "Nothing fits me." What a terrible assortment. There's nothing to choose from. A security guard caught up with her on the street. "Young lady, please go back into the store." "What's the matter?" Caitlin asked with contrived indifference, immediately tense with a premonition of trouble. "Come with us and you'll find out," the guard replied evasively, not wanting to scare her off prematurely. "Look, I don't know what kind of fun you're having in there, but I don't have time for this. If you don't explain why I have to go back to the store, then I don't have to." Caitlin was indignant and aggressive. She herself slowly backed up to run away. Noticing this intention, the security guard roughly grabbed Ashley by the elbow and dragged her towards the store. She tried to break free, but he had a dead grip on her. So the more she resisted, the harder he squeezed her arm. Caitlin felt herself in a steel vise and realized that even if she managed to get out of this mess, her arm would be bruised from the big man's grip. That meant she wouldn't be able to go out in short-sleeved clothes for at least 2 weeks, because she wouldn't be able to hide the bruises with foundation. "Let go of me," asshole, Caitlin yelled, trying to fight off the guard. "Are you going to break my arm now? I'll report you to the police. People, are you seeing this? This big guy attacked me in the middle of the street and is dragging me to who knows where. Somebody call the police." But her exertions were in vain. A couple of minutes later, they were already in the store, and in another 10 minutes the police arrived there, called by the sales clerks on the instructions of the boutique owner. Arriving police officers interviewed the sellers and security guards, watched the video footage from the cameras, and, based on the data obtained, decided to conduct a personal search of the buyer. "Now you will go to the fitting room together with our employee and 2 witnesses. There we will have to check what you have under your clothes," the operative said, in a mundane tone, as if asking her to go to the bakery for bread. "Are you guys out of your depth in there?" Caitlin exclaimed indignantly. "I'm not taking my clothes off." "Unfortunately, you have no choice. Either you will do so now voluntarily, or you will be detained for resisting officers, and a body search will still be conducted on you, but under different circumstances." There was nothing else left but to fulfill what was required. Of course, under her clothes they found the dress she was looking for, and the employees of the boutique identified it as goods from their store. The search by police officers. The results of the search, the testimony of witnesses, as well as the owner of the boutique, who had arrived by that time, recorded. This became, along with the camera footage, key evidence of Ashley's guilt. Since the crime was obvious and Ashley had no money for a good lawyer, her case quickly went to trial. There she was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with serving time in a penal colony of general regime. The stolen dress turned out to be very expensive. As it was found out later during the investigation, it was from the latest collection of a famous fashion designer. The fact that Caitlin in fact did not have time to use it, and it was returned safe and sound to the owner of the boutique after the trial, the court did not care. "The defendant has the last word," said the judge sternly. A woman of indeterminate age with glasses who looked at Caitlin like a boa constrictor at a rabbit. "I am very remorseful for what I have done. If I had been given the chance to relive that day, I wouldn't have done it. What happened was a great lesson for me. Please show me leniency and don't send me to jail," Ashley sobbed, looking into the judge's cold eyes that showed no sympathy. Her tears did not move the prosecutor or the judge. She was given almost the maximum sentence possible under the relevant article. That damn boutique had gone through Ashley's life like a bulldozer from the moment she'd seen those damn dresses. Everything had gone wrong for her. Her crazy luck, which used to be the envy of many, had hit a concrete wall and shattered into small pieces that couldn't be put back together. First of all, Caitlin was caught red-handed, which is saying a lot. How many times had she pulled this stunt and everything went smoothly? Sometimes she'd take out several outfits at once, and here was one translucent dress for a fabulous price, as she'd learned from the investigator. "I caused damage to a businesswoman in the amount of 300,000 rubles. It's a piece of cheap toll, not a dress. Its price on market day is 2,000 rubles, including tailoring," Caitlin exclaimed when she heard the sum. The victim provided a certificate that this dress was from the latest collection of a famous designer, made in limited quantities. Only 10 pieces. One of them was sold in the boutique from where you stole it. Here is the average market value of the item. If you have reason to believe it's overpriced, you can appeal. But I have no reason to doubt the reliability of this data, the investigator replied. Second, when she decided to go to Plan B and negotiate with the store owner, it was a grumpy Barrett, pumped up on silicone and Botox. She wouldn't even listen to Ashley. "What do I need this dress for now? Who's going to buy it after you? It's a designer exclusive thing. not your consumer goods. You wouldn't dream of such things. But I just came out of the store wearing it, Caitlin tried to explain. Are you really that dumb, or are you pretending to be? People who can afford a dress like that wouldn't even sit next to you. But no one knows about it, though Caitlin put in. No one knows. All the clerks, the customers in the store, the security guards, the police prosecutor's office, the lawyers, and the court. And you call that no one knows? The owner of the boutique came running in. If the owner had been a man, there wouldn't have been a problem. Ashley acted as bait for men, and they flew to her bright light like moths, happily burning their wings. But because of her difficult character, no one stayed long. To burn in a blazing fire to the ground is not too pleasant. Unfortunately, it was impossible to come to an agreement with the owner. The woman was adamant and was not going to forgive Caitlin's deed. Hey, Austin, I saw boots like that today. I didn't have enough money, Caitlin exclaimed, pouting her lips and making eyes like the cat from Shrek. And how much are you short? Austin sighed. Just little things, just $100. Caitlin exclaimed, flapping her fluffy eyelashes, framing her angel eyes. Wow, that's great. Austin whistled. How much did those boots cost if you don't have $100 on them? Austin, their brand name, Caitlin exclaimed, genuinely not understanding how anyone could ask such stupid questions. And Austin had to splurge. But soon he realized that the only thing he needed from relationships with women was money. Lots of money. She needed a lot of money to fulfill her wants and needs. She wasn't looking for love or intimacy. She was looking for financial independence and the ability to live the life she wanted. And when Austin got bored with this one-gate game, he disappeared and someone else took his place. But no place is empty. Thirdly, the investigators and assistant prosecutor involved in the case, as well as the judge, were women. Thus, the fate deprived her of even the slightest chance of relief. That's how sweet Caitlin ended up in prison, with all the consequences. When she was transferred from the detention center to the colony, Caitlin, having watched foreign movies, thought that she would quickly build up the local prisoners and earn authority. But she was out of luck again. On her first day, she hooked up with dangerous female criminals. Why aren't we saying hello? Are we not human? One of them asked, addressing Ashley, who had just been brought into the cell. New girl, I'm talking to you. I wish health only to those whom I know and respect personally. Caitlin answered rudely and looked at her defiantly. Oh, so, in your opinion, we don't deserve respect, and we don't need health either. Did you guys hear that? We've got someone in trouble, she said, jumping off the bunk where she'd been lying and walking slowly, as if dancing, toward Ashley. Why don't you say something? You got your tongue out. What's it to you? Don't you have a tongue of your own? You'd better watch yours. You're not making any sense. You're snapping at me, aren't you? She looked me in the eye and said angrily, and you're wrong. If you don't want to treat us, I'll have to teach you some sense. The prisoner gritted her teeth and grinned. She whistled in a friendly manner, and two more sturdily built girls came to Caitlin at once, whose appearance was unrecognizable as female. But since you won't say hello to us, you'll have our hospitality, the prisoner said, grinning, and punched Caitlin in the stomach. That's for the first one. Ashley bent in half from the professionally delivered blow to her liver. Before she could get away from the first blow, she was hit by a second one on the back of her lower back. She had been hit with something metal on her kidneys. The second prisoner pushed her in the other direction. And this is for the second one, the first prisoner said. Ashley slid down the wall to the floor. At that moment, someone kicked her hard in the face. It knocked her unconscious. Well, this is salad and compote for you, said the prisoner, and spat on her senseless body. After such a warm reception, Ashley was taken to the prison hospital. When she recovered a little from her injuries, she discovered that one of the doctors in the hospital, her former lover, Michael Campbell. Their relationship in the past was quite spicy. How many hot days they spent together. Just thinking about it made her dizzy. Then she left him for a rich man. Michael didn't show it in front of anyone, but when they were alone, he looked at Ashley meaningfully, and she felt like he hadn't forgotten her, but he didn't want to talk to her for some reason. Probably embarrassed that I'm a prisoner now, Caitlin mentally reassured herself. But when she was called to his gynecology office for a routine checkup, Ashley didn't know what to think. She was worried for good reason. As soon as she entered, he locked the door and began stripping down to his waist. Ashley shouldn't complain, he threatened, buckling his pants belt when he was done. Even if you tried to say something, no one would believe you. You're not a human being to them now. You're trash, which means you can be treated accordingly. Caitlin felt like garbage now. She wanted to take a shower to wash off the filth, but even that innocent pleasure was denied her now. In prison, one could not bathe more than twice a week, only on days designated by the administration. Caitlin prayed and hoped that this incident had been a one-time revenge for what she had done to Michael, and that it would not happen again. Apparently, God had indeed heard her prayers. She was never called back to the gynecologist again, but a month later, Ashley had another problem, a delay. Her period didn't come for the next month either, plus nausea in the mornings. When Caitlin stood bent in half by the toilet for the 10th time that morning, her cellmate couldn't take it anymore. Look, didn't we book a concert without requests? Why do you give it to us every morning? Caitlin didn't understand her. Here's the tightwad we got. I say, are you by any chance pregnant? If so, why are you in our cell? Or did you stupidly not tell anyone? No, I'm not pregnant, Caitlin replied uncertainly, though she was beginning to doubt it herself. The last time she'd had anything was over 2 months ago. And with Michael, they definitely weren't using protection, so she could very well be pregnant. What a twist. That's all it took to make her happy, Ashley thought. But then she realized she could use the situation to her advantage. She would apply for parole, citing her pregnancy, and ask to be transferred to a special cell for pregnant inmates. The examination confirmed the pregnancy. The term is about 2 months plus or minus a week. The gynecologist's report that day allowed Ashley to get a leniency. She was transferred to a special cell for pregnant women. Pregnant cellmates were less dangerous because of their position, so it was better for them to be together, away from the other prisoners who could harm even the future mother out of jealousy or envy. From the first day, the cellmates had been leering at Caitlin when they heard about her privileges. Did you hear our rat is moving to the maternity cell? Barrett asked loudly to her friend Jessica. Emily on her tail brought word right away, confirmed an inmate named Hawkins, whom everyone called Carrot for some reason. She runs to the warden, reports everything to him, and then here she spreads what she hears. Emily heard about our rat's interesting situation and the favor she's entitled to. Fooled Jessica. The other 2 rats around her, Melissa and Sarah, said, so they were called Melly and Sari. If Caitlin had behaved differently when she first arrived, she might have been called differently. But after that incident, Melly had called her Rat, and that's what everyone had been calling her ever since. At least, that nasty trio did. So Caitlin was happy to pack her things to move to the special cell for pregnant women and new moms. Better to listen to babies crying from morning till night than insults and sneers just from the cell for Jessica, Sari, and Barrett. Caitlin finally breathed a sigh of relief. Here she would no longer be harassed by Melly and her henchmen, and she soon discovered another plus. Pregnant and nursing women were fed much better than the regular prisoners. Mothers-to-be and those who breastfed had more vegetables, fruits, and vitamins in their diets, and they worked much less in the local garment industry. So, while battling morning sickness in drugstores, another 7 months flew by. Caitlin never told anyone who the father of her unborn child was, not even to him. But after giving birth to a healthy baby girl, she applied for parole again. And this time the warden, who sympathized with Ashley, because she reminded him of his daughter who had died in a car accident, supported her application and gave her the best possible characterization for the court. A few months after the petition was filed, the warden called Caitlin to his office. So, do you want to go free? He asked Ashley, who entered his office. Yes, Caitlin answered honestly. Then your petition has been granted. Go pack your things and go free with a clear conscience, the warden informed her with a fatherly smile. Oh, thank you so much, Ashley exclaimed. Goodbye. Goodbye. And don't ever come back to us again, he exclaimed sternly. Having received the coveted parole, Caitlin wrote a farewell letter to the warden, telling him what the doctor had done to her, adding that he could have the child for himself, as she refused to take with her a baby girl born under such sad circumstances. Thus relieved of her burden, Caitlin appeared in the evening on the threshold of her parents' house. The old mother had not expected to see her daughter home so early, and looked at her confusedly when she opened the door. Daughter's here, drunk, Caitlin blurted out, smiling to lighten the mood. Mom, why are you frozen on the doorstep? Why don't you let your daughter in? Or aren't you happy to see me? The mother only now believed the reality of what was happening and fussed. Oh, what am I really? Come on in, daughter. Of course, I just wasn't expecting you so early. My lawyer told me not to expect you before 5 years, said there was no reason to reduce the sentence. Oh, mother, you'd listen less to that skank. He'd sell his own mother for a penny, and he won't lift a finger for free. That's how he wanted to get money out of you. Like there's no grounds for parole right now, and we need to do something to make them appear. and he can help with that. It's classic, Caitlin replied. I don't have the money. Daughter, the elderly mother sighed bitterly. And if I did, God knows I wouldn't regret it. I'd give every penny to the lawyer if he could help you. And it's a good thing he didn't, Caitlin retorted. Otherwise, I'd have thrown it away, giving it to that bastard. He wasn't doing it for me, he was doing it for himself. These jackals do nothing but go around to the grief-stricken relatives of convicts and hint that they can do something to get something last. And once they get the money, they're done. Do you know how many such stories I've heard? Returning home to her elderly mother's modest apartment, Caitlin found herself back at the beginning of her journey, only now with a lifelong stigma. What should she do? Where to go? Caitlin tried the unemployment office, and employers seemed willing to hire her. But as soon as it came to a background check, she was told the same thing: sorry, but we are not ready to offer you a job at the moment. When she was told that for the 10th time in a row, Caitlin asked the employee directly what was wrong. The woman sitting there took pity on the young-looking girl and told the truth. You see, nowadays every company has its own security department. Former employees of the police and other law enforcement agencies work there. They use their own channels to check candidates. And if there are any negative nuances, well, a criminal record, for example, the applicant is rejected without explanation. That's how Caitlin realized that the way to a normal job with a criminal record was closed to her. She came out of prison at a complete loss. Even if she made it to the end of the year, registered as unemployed, she would not be able to get by on the pennies they paid to those who did not work for the next 12 months. What's she supposed to do with that? She doesn't know how to do anything to make money from it. She wouldn't be an entrepreneur either, because Caitlin only knew how to spend money. Until now, Caitlin hadn't thought about how to make that kind of money. At home, she spent the rest of the morning looking through the ads in the local newspaper. Suddenly, her eyes fell on an advertisement for a massage parlor. Beautiful young girls are needed for high-paying jobs. Housing provided. Payments are daily, pay per piece, on average from $5,000 a day. Caitlin understood what kind of work she was talking about. No one would just pay money just for youth and beauty. In her current position, she looked at the oldest profession from a different angle. It seemed like a good option now. Caitlin reflected she used to spread her legs for men like Austin to fund her whims. Here it was still the same. Only she'd get paid right away instead of once a week or month. Caitlin called the number listed and was given an appointment to meet her future employer. She turned out to be a woman with traces of her former beauty. It was likely one of the former employees who had retired and moved up the career ladder. She professionally assessed Caitlin from head to toe. From the looks of it, you're a good fit for us, Emily Barrett summarized. You can start tomorrow, girl, can't you? Our shift starts at noon. But if there was a night shift, we let the girls sleep in longer. You have to give us advance notice. Don't be late to the salon. I'll give you the exact address if you agree to work. And what would my job entail? Caitlin asked, deciding to play dumb. The girls who come here know exactly what it's about, the underground brothel owner hissed, enunciating the words clearly. If you don't know what they do here, why did you come? Caitlin answered nothing, as she understood everything perfectly well from the beginning. She had no choice, so she agreed. Soon she moved into the rooms behind the massage parlor. To make the girls more relaxed and efficient, they were offered light drugs, supposedly not addictive. But addiction, of course, did occur. After a few months, Caitlin found herself on the needle, working not for real money, but for a dose. This lucrative business was built on this beautiful promises of high incomes lured future night butterflies. The girls were created conditions so that they themselves decided to settle in the rooms behind the salon. There, they were professionally processed by experienced women who had been working in this field for more than a year. Girls in our business are nowhere without drugs. We all use here and nothing. No one has become a drug addict. So purely to relax, not to clamp down. Then clients won't complain that you're inactive, and performance increases. Experienced mentors explained to newcomers, and the young believed them. When addiction occurred, the brain refused to work normally. No one found out why things were not as promised. The only thing they thought about was getting a dose in time for withdrawal. For the sake of a timely dose, they were ready for all conditions. Then the young girls' papers were taken away from them, and they worked for shelter and a dose. Drugs were not a cheap pleasure, so they not only earned nothing, but also constantly worked off debts. If she was in debt, she had to beg every new dose from Ashley, who hired the girls. No one knew her real name. Maybe that's what her parents called their daughter, but she turned out to be a real bitch. She ruthlessly ruled the lives of young girls who foolishly or inexperiencedly stepped onto that slippery slope. Instead of discouraging them, Ashley ruthlessly pushed them into the swamp, taking a percentage of each one. Amber had a vested interest in keeping her staff up to date. Used material rarely survived here until the age of 35. And if they did, they were sent away. At that age, cheap prostitutes looked already at all 50 and were not in great demand, unless a recently released prisoner would order one, if there were no others. It was costly to keep prostitutes with little work. They brought less than they were worth. That's why they got rid of them. Amber was lucky in that respect, and she was ready to bite anyone for her place. The girls occasionally tried to ask her how she got the admin position, but it was a sore subject for Amber, and after a few unsuccessful attempts, they stopped trying to find out. "How did you become an administrator?" Caitlin asked one day. "None of your damn business," Amber snapped back. "Is this story so scary that you don't want to tell anyone?" Caitlin asked jokingly and regretted her question. Amber turned dark. With a menacing look, she stepped toward Caitlin, who shuffled backward until her back was against the wall. There was nowhere else to go. Amber stepped up close and growled in her face. "I took the seat that was vacated when the previous receptionist left. And it's best you don't know exactly how she left here. All I can tell you is, feet first. She was just like you, asking too many uncomfortable questions. Any more questions?" "No," Caitlin replied in a shaky voice, swallowing saliva. Soon Caitlin was in a drug frenzy, and her life became a series of monotonous events: body, dose to body. That day she was shaking ungodly even more than usual. Sticky cold sweat came out, her muscles twisted, and she wanted to howl in pain. Her blood pressure was off the charts, her eyes were watering, her heart was racing. My joints were twisting unbearably, my veins were pulling. This was the payoff for the brief euphoria. Caitlin realized that she wouldn't make it to the morning in such a state. She might die. So, despite the strictest prohibition, she left the den and knocked on Amber's office. No one opened. Then Caitlin knocked again. Silence. But she knew Amber, like herself, was one of the former prostitutes left here by the business owner for merit, but also not let go far away. Caitlin realized that Amber hadn't opened out of spite and began hammering desperately on the metal door with her fist, not noticing the pain. After a few minutes, the door opened and Amber's disgruntled face appeared in the doorway. "Have you lost your fear? Get back in your kennel right now. For Christ's sake, let me borrow a dose." Caitlin begged. "I know you have a stash. I really need it. Alacha, honey, I'll do anything. I'll work it off as you say. Just give it to me." "Even if I do, it's not for you," Amber cut her off. "You owe so much, you're already working off the rest of your life. And you also have a conscience to beg in the middle of the night. This ain't no church. You don't give alms here. Get out of here and pray. I don't call Ryan about you breaking the ban." "When did you happen to do that?" Caitlin continued to be indignant. "I mean, you came up from the ranks too and lived under the same conditions. And now that you've become a superior over us, you've forgotten that you're one of us." Amber gave her a murderous look. "Who are you gaping at, you cheap doormat? Did you and I eat from the same plate or baptize our children? I won't sit in the same toilet with you. You're not my equal. Get out of here, you ungrateful bitch, and wait for Ryan to get here." Amber was angry and slammed the door loudly in Ashley's face as she tried to say something else. Half an hour later, Ryan arrived with two tough guys. They dragged Caitlin by the hair to a special punishment room. For several hours without a break, they beat her brutally so that she would remember who she was. This time, however, Ryan went too far. Caitlin ended up in a bad hospital where she was taken by ambulance. People passing by reported an unconscious girl in a ditch. She was half naked, battered, and appeared to be dead. But there was still life in her. The God Caitlin cried out to did not send her a deliverance death. Caitlin, miraculously alive and almost hopeless, was confined to a hospital bed. Ashley's recovery was short-lived. She spent more than a week in a medically induced coma, which doctors put her in to ease her suffering. Ashley suffered multiple broken bones, a broken rib punctured a lung, but doctors fought for her life. My God, who did this to this poor girl? The orderly asked the nurse. What's there to feel sorry for her for? A prostitute and a drug addict. You can see she's beaten up. The nurse was indignant. After examining her, the doctor said it's all ruined in there, even if she was a prostitute. So isn't she a human being? The nurse marveled at her colleague's callousness. Maybe she was held by force and put on drugs so she wouldn't escape. I saw a TV program. They told stories that would make your hair stand on end. Oh, Liuba, you're naive, laughed the nurse. You see criminals everywhere. They go there themselves for easy money, and then they start taking all sorts of nasty things. The drugs probably keep them energized, ready to work. And you've already come up with the script for a tear-jerking melodrama. Let the girl come to her senses and tell us what happened. By the way, we have missing persons reports for girls with this appearance. People are coming today for identification, so we need to clean up the ward well. Orderly Luba shook her head. What a man. He knows that the girl is wanted as a missing person, but he says that she herself became a prostitute and a drug addict. How many of these girls all over the country are desperate and go down a crooked subpath to earn their bread? And then maybe they'd be glad to get out, but they can't. Luba looked with pity at the thin, battered, unconscious young woman. Her hair had become a stiff bundle, so it had been decided to shave her naked. Luba's blood ran cold at the thought that this girl could have been her daughter. People accompanied by police officers came in for identification. Attention. There will now be an official identification procedure. All details are on record. Look carefully at the girl lying here. If anyone recognizes her, report her at once. She has a rare blood type with 0 rough factor. It might help you somehow if you knew for sure that the missing person had the same type. One by one, the visitors approached the bunk and scrutinized the facial features of the unconscious girl lying there. They all looked at that haggard face with hope and began to cry with disappointment, because this girl was not the one they were looking for. Finally, it was the turn of the old woman who lived in the corner. The nurse helped her to approach and supported her so that she would not fall senseless. Losing her last hope, like the others, the old woman raised her trailing eyes and looked at the patient. One quick glance from Lucy Stewart wasn't enough for her to recognize her daughter. My God, Ashley, the elderly mother, gasped and clutched at her heart. That's my daughter. Citizen policeman, that's my daughter. The Lord heard my prayers and gave me back my child. Praise the Lord. Citizen Stewart, are you sure that the girl lying here is your daughter, Caitlin Jason Ashley Viktorovna, who disappeared a year ago? The police officer interrogated for the record. Why do you think I don't recognize my own daughter? Lucy Stewart, answer clearly in one syllable to the questions you are asked. This is for procedural reasons. Do you confirm in the presence of witnesses that the girl lying in the hospital bed, whose identity has not yet been established, is your daughter Ashley Viktorovna, whose disappearance you reported to the police a year ago? Yes, I do, Caitlin's mother replied quietly. The witnesses, please record this fact by signing your signatures in the protocol of identification. Lucy Stewart will need your autograph here too. The rest of you, please sign the form as participants in the box below the protocol. A few days later, Ashley was brought out of her medically induced coma and opened her eyes for the first time in a long time. As Caitlin struggled to lift her heavy eyelids, the sunlight blinded her unaccustomedly. She had to squeeze her eyes shut. Then she brought her palm to her eyes and covered her eyelids with it. She tried again, and this time it didn't hurt so much, but her vision was still unfocused. Objects blurred in front of her, and she looked around, not realizing where she was. She finally made out someone calling her name through the absorbent cotton, turned toward the source of the sound, and saw a large blur sitting in a chair beside her, clearly saying something to her. Ashley, daughter, thank God you've come to your senses. How are you feeling? Caitlin heard. She continued to stare at the talking colored spot. After a couple of minutes, the image became clearer. It was her mother. Mom, how did you get here? Caitlin was surprised. My daughter, I visited you every day, waiting for you to come to your senses. And now God heard my prayers, and you finally opened your eyes. You can't be here. Caitlin suddenly blurted out, looking around warily. If Ryan or Amber sees you, you and I will both be in trouble. Leave now and don't come back here again. Daughter, how could you do that? Why are you chasing your own mother out of the hospital? I've been looking for you for a year. I couldn't sleep at night. I cried my eyes out. And now that I've finally found you, you're chasing me away. And who are Amber and Ryan? They're doctors. Don't worry. I'm allowed by the chief of medicine to see you anytime I want. He said it's good for you to wake up faster. And he's not lying. You've already opened your eyes. What hospital? What are you talking about? Caitlin stared at him with an incomprehensible look and turned her head, looking around. Daughter, you were brought to the hospital by ambulance 2 weeks ago, barely alive. They did some surgeries, and then you were in a coma. You've just come out of it now, her mother explained. Caitlin tried to recall the last events she remembered. Vague images came to her eyes. Here she was being dragged by the hair to the Red Room, where the guilty were punished. Here she was being taught another life lesson by Ryan and his team. Caitlin's blood pressure immediately skyrocketed at the mere memory. For a moment, she just blacked out, and with her horrified consciousness, she thanked God sincerely for his mercy. And then darkness. She remembered nothing else. For the first time after these terrible events, she opened her eyes and thought she was in one of the rooms of an underground brothel. It seemed to her that only a few hours had passed, but after her mother's words, Caitlin realized that at least 2 weeks had passed since then. "Where did the ambulance take me from?" Caitlin asked her mother. "Oh, my daughter, some monsters threw you, mutilated and almost naked, into a roadside ditch. That's where you were seen by people driving by in a car. They went to the bushes to pee, and there you were lying there. So they called an ambulance. Thank them for that. God bless them. They could have been scared and not said anything. Then the doctors wouldn't have had time to save you. The nurse told me in confidence that everyone thinks it's a miracle you made it. A little more time, and you would have given your soul to God. So you were born under a lucky star, baby." "That's a hell of a lucky star," Caitlin exclaimed in despair. "I'd rather be dead than wait for someone to come and kill me." "Who's going to come after you?" Lucy Stewart splashed her hands. "Who would want that?" "Oh, Mother, I wish I had your childish naivete. Maybe life would seem simpler then. Those who threw me in the gutter did it because they thought I was dead. And when they find out they were wrong, they'll come to make up for it." "Oh my God, my daughter, what are you talking about? Who did you get mixed up with?" Mother wailed. "Let's tell the police. They'll help you." "I know how they'll help," Caitlin smirked. "I've seen a year's worth of law enforcement. They're at the top of the list of beneficiaries and bribe takers. They have a fat piece of that dirty business. No one's going to give up that tidbit for me. Don't tell anyone anything and keep praying. Only now for no one to know I survived." Lucy Stewart understood nothing of what her daughter told her. In her mind, back in the USSR, law enforcement officers had an aura of sanctity. They could always be relied upon to handle any problem, whether it was a kitten climbing a high branch or fighting criminals. But that police officers could tarnish the honor of the uniform something immoral and illegal. Lucy Stewart could not even in a terrible dream, could not imagine. She wrote off what she'd heard as delirium from trauma or medication. "I guess that coma didn't go away from my poor girl," the mother thought sadly. Caitlin didn't care what her mother thought, because along with the return of consciousness came the return of her own personal hell withdrawal. It was impossible to count on a dose while lying in the hospital, and she was once again experiencing the agony of hell, intensified by the numerous injuries. In the free hospital, they even saved money on painkillers, so she had to experience it all live. Her consciousness almost left her from time to time from the horrible pain. In rare, blissful moments, she fell into oblivion. After a while, she began to think she was seeing Michael Kutapau again. Had she ever loved? If she had, it was only with him alone. But she couldn't forget that incident in his office either. And even if she had forgiven him, what difference would it make? After all, it was probably her morbid imagination playing a cruel joke, throwing up familiar images. How could Michael have ended up in a godforsaken cheap clinic? No, it's a delusion. She's already hallucinating, as the girls from massage parlors told her. But in order not to be tormented by meaningless hopes, Caitlin decided to clarify the moment with her mother. "Mom, am I just imagining it, or does Michael Kutapau periodically come into my room? Well, remember, I met him when he was a student in medical school." "Oh, Michael, of course I remember. He's a good guy. I always liked him," Lucy Stewart replied. "Yeah, I've seen him in your room a couple times. He'd bring you some medicine and give it to the doctor. I don't know what they are, but they make you feel better. Thanks to him, he hasn't forgotten us, even though it's been so long. And you left him for some reason. If it were any other man, he'd be offended and hold a black grudge. But this one answered evil with good. Oh, Mother, if you knew how he has already repaid me with virtue," murmured the puzzled Caitlin. "Daughter, what did you say?" "Nothing, Mom. You just heard it." Caitlin resolved to make every effort to remain conscious in time for another visit to Michael Kutapau. For days she had waited unsuccessfully for him to arrive, gritting her teeth, enduring the pain throughout her body. And then, on Sunday night, someone knocked gently on the door of her room. The door opened quietly. Michael stood on the doorstep with a bag in his hands. He tiptoed to Caitlin's bed so as not to wake the other patients. By then she had been moved from the IQ to a regular room. "Well, hello," he said hello and smiled a disarming smile. "What are you here for? How did you find me?" Caitlin asked tiredly. "Forgive me, you fool. I've been berating myself all this time for what I did to you back there. When I saw you that time, I was filled with such anger. For leaving me and trading me for a rich man. He told how he couldn't get her out of his mind, took their daughter from the orphanage, and quit his job. Now he worked part-time to provide for his family. Caitlin marveled at her daughter's symbolic name, Hope. I've been looking for you for a long time. Got your mother found out you were missing. Found the detective who was on your case to let me know if there was any news. And then a couple weeks ago he called to say you'd been found. Michael explained that he'd been helping with medication and paying for treatment so that Caitlin would be treated well at the hospital. She chuckled bitterly. Why would you do all that? Do you know the state I was in when they found me? I know, but I can't leave you. You're the mother of my child, and at least for Hope's sake, I have to give you a helping hand. You're so right. It's sickening. Who asked for your help? The same hand that gagged me. Please don't, pleaded Michael, painfully ashamed to remember his horrible act. What is it you don't want to talk about? We haven't talked about it yet. Or rather, you have spoken out, relieved your soul, and I decided to leave the madman. It's traumatizing my memories. Now that we're talking about it, let's be honest. Hear the other side now, face the ugly truth. Caitlin, I'm so sorry for what I did to you. No matter how many times I apologize to you, it won't be enough. But what will another apology change? There's nothing. In fact, I can't undo, so I act on the situation. I try to make amends, deal with the consequences. You call a kid consequences. What an interesting word you've chosen. Well done, our fighter. Saved? Too bad I don't have any medals handy. I would have given them to you. I'll have to ask him to buy a chocolate machine. Then I'll be sure to present it with all the honors available in a hospital room. Why would you do that? Michael asked resentfully. I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. I sincerely want to make up for what I've done. And I took my daughter because I really want to take care of her. And if I were the scoundrel you portray me to be, would I have refused to take her? Look how honorable we are. Took our daughter so she wouldn't end up in an orphanage. The wretched mother left her at the maternity hospital. Didn't want to take her back with her, you sissy. And then the superhero daddy showed up and saved the little princess from the evil dragon, the state guardianship system. And how did this hero forcibly want to study that same mommy? This is the child of no love. We'll keep silent about that. It's more convenient for everyone, isn't it? Why not love? Michael couldn't take it anymore. Maybe you never felt anything for me, but I loved you. I loved you so much that I would do anything for you. All you had to do was ask, and the whole world would be at your feet. But all you wanted was money, and you didn't want to wait for me to earn it honestly. So you traded me for the first wallet you could find. It was greed that landed you in juvie, and things could have been a lot different if you hadn't left me. Oh, don't get all lovey-dovey and tell me fairy tales. Even if you worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you wouldn't have enough money for my needs. Deal with it. You can say whatever you want, but know that I still care about you, Michael said finally, realizing that the conversation was over for the day. When the door slammed behind Michael, Caitlin was torn because he had voiced what she was afraid to admit even to herself. Lately, she had often wondered how her fate would have turned out if she hadn't left Michael for a seemingly lucrative party. But a serious relationship was out of the question. After that, Caitlin simply passed from one rich man to another, like a passing red flag. Once out of the colony, she sank to the level of a low-level prostitute. Her looks and health were too compromised from the drugs for an elite one. They didn't make her any prettier or younger, and now Caitlin mourned her fate with bitter tears. Where did I stumble so badly that everything went wrong? She pondered. Did God punish me so? But the dresses are from expensive boutiques. It turns out there's no justice there either. As long as I was stealing in ordinary stores, it was okay. As soon as I embarrassed myself at that damn boutique, everything went to hell. That's it. That's the answer to my question. The damn boutique. I must have gotten on the wrong side. This boutique owner must have made a deal with the devil. How else do you explain her selling a dress for the price of a car? Caitlin stayed in the hospital for another 2 weeks. Michael, despite his abrupt conversation with her, continued to visit her, hoping to melt her cold heart. At first, Caitlin was angry and kept berating him for wasting his and her time. Michael, how many times do I have to tell you? Stop coming here. Thank you so much for your help and all the good things you've done for me. As for the rest, God is your judge, but don't come to me again. We have nothing in common and can't have anything in common. I'm a fallen woman, and you'd better stay away from me, lest you get dirty with that filth. And you're young, handsome. You can find someone if you want to, so don't waste your time on me. Stop talking nonsense, Michael pleaded as usual. I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing it for our daughter. Listen, she's just a baby and she needs her mother. Never can a father replace a mother, no matter how good he is. Soon she'll start asking uncomfortable questions. And what am I going to answer her? And that's your problem, Caitlin replied, trying not to look Michael in the eye. No one forced you to take her out of the orphanage. Thousands of kids stay in orphanages, and nothing. So what if it's one more, one less? It's no big deal. Caitlin, when did you get so callous? Michael asked sadly. You weren't like this before. I had good teachers. Thanks to them, they taught me a lot. I'll never forget their lessons, Caitlin replied with a wry smile. Finally, the long-awaited discharge day arrived. In anticipation of it, Caitlin was excited. She was happy to be out of the confined space more than a year after her fatal mistake of finding a job. At the same time, she was incredibly scared because she had been weaned from the big world and would have to get used to it all over again. Her attending physician entered the room to give her a pre-discharge briefing. Caitlin, we're discharging you because we've done everything we can on our end. But you need good rehabilitation as well as specialized treatment in a drug rehab facility. After the doctor left, Caitlin stood at the room window for a long time. The sunny September evening was coming to an end, filled with a special warmth and coziness. Such an evening is the perfect time for romantic walks, cozy sit-downs with friends, or going out to enjoy the beauty of nature and the majestic peace of the mountains. But Ashley had no one left to share this beautiful evening with. It made her heart feel lousy. The dragonfly was hopping, singing the red summer. Before I knew it, winter was rolling in my eyes. I was getting out of what I was left with a bare ass and a bean. Caitlin grinned bitterly. Michael doesn't count. The more insistent he tries to sneak into my life, the more I want to kick him out of there. After everything that's happened to me, I highly doubt I can let anyone get too close to me. Not right now, anyway. Caitlin went to bed with those thoughts and woke up the next morning, determined. She needed to find some meaning for her existence. Caitlin cautiously crossed the threshold of the clinic where she had spent the last month. The bright sunlight hit her eyes, making her squint. She didn't have sunglasses, of course, so she had to cover her eyes from the blinding sunlight. After walking a few steps, Caitlin saw people standing in the parking lot, waving happily at her. When she looked closer, she saw her mother and Michael Kutapao among those who greeted her. And in Michael's arms was a little blonde girl with a pink balloon. The little girl gawked at Caitlin with her big doll's eyes and waved her chubby little hand, imitating the adults. At that moment, Caitlin felt a pang in her chest, as if a petrified crust had cracked and spread, crunching its rough edges against her heart. What she saw moved her to tears. The salty droplets made their way timidly at first, then confidently flowed in two streams down Caitlin's cheeks. Then the dam burst, and now the torrent was rushing down the mountainside, sweeping away everything in its path. Fortunately, she had no makeup with her, and only this fact saved Caitlin from the humiliating sight of smeared mascara, mixed with eyeliner and shadows. Caitlin shook with silent sobs. Seeing that something was wrong with her, the greeters rushed to her aid. "Daughter, why are you crying?" wondered Lucy Stewart. "You should be glad all is well. Look, and Pamela has come to meet you. Why didn't you even tell me you had a baby? I'm a grandmother after all." "Mom, I couldn't lift myself up. Where else am I supposed to pull a baby?" Caitlin waved her mother off. "A boulder to raise. I left my daughter with her father. Figured he wouldn't leave his little blood child to fend for herself. And you see, I was right. Good thing Michael is conscientious," Mother grumbled. "Thank him for everything. We owe him our lives. I don't even know how to get even for my granddaughter." "Yes, Michael is very conscientious. In some places too conscientious," Caitlin muttered, feeling uncomfortable under the stares of the three of them. Michael hailed a cab and they all drove together to Lucy Stewart's house. The grandmother gladly took her suddenly found granddaughter in her arms, and Pamela looked through the window at the passing cars and colorful buildings, with sun bunnies flickering in their windows. This little girl, thank God, had not yet faced real adult life with all its difficulties and fears. Therefore, she carelessly flapped her thick eyelashes and looked around, occasionally making joyful exclamations, admiring the most ordinary things for us: clouds shimmering in the sun, flying pigeons and cats and dogs running by. And while Pamela was recognizing the world around her, her father pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Sorry, there's no way to kneel in a cab," he said, smiling. "But let's assume the intention was there." "What is it?" Caitlin asked him in a hoarse voice that, for some reason, now decided to treacherously shake. Open it and see for yourself, Michael suggested. Caitlin opened the box cautiously, as if she expected to see a bomb with a countdown timer in it. But there was a bomb of sorts. On the satin interior upholstery lay a ring that shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. As soon as direct sunlight fell on it, Caitlin had never seen such beauty so close, and even for herself. The stone stood on a special stand shaped like a crown, and the rest of it was woven in the form of vines. Caitlin could hardly tear herself away from the mesmerizing sight and raised her eyes full of genuine surprise to Michael. "It's very beautiful," she whispered enthusiastically, watching the stone shimmer and play in the sunlight with the corner of her eye. "I've been looking for a ring worthy of you for a long time. And when I saw this, I knew immediately that I had found what I needed. Would you do me the biggest favor of my life by agreeing to be my wife?" Michael said in a rapid-fire voice, light-headed because he was afraid to face his fear. Caitlin remained silent, continuing, quite like Pamela, to examine the ring. Then she abruptly slammed the box shut, and shifting her gaze to Michael, whispered, "You've wasted so much time looking for it. A wire one would have suited me just fine. Remember when you made me one and gave it to me when you were a student?" Caitlin continued her confession. "I just now realized what an idiot I was. Time after time, I ruined my life with my own hands, threw away all the chances to become a normal person that fate gave me. And only when someone upstairs finally got angry at me and started eating my face in the dirt until I came to a realization. Only then did I realize that everything is learned in comparison. Seeing the three of you outside the clinic today, I realized that fate was giving me a chance again. Maybe the last one, and if I miss it now, I will regret it very much for the rest of my life." "So that's a yes," breathlessly, Michael asked. "That's a yes," Caitlin replied. And in her bright blue eyes, Michael saw some inner light that in its beauty could well rival the stone of the engagement ring he had given her. "I still have it in my costume jewelry box," Michael muttered confusedly. "Is that a yes or a no? Believe me, we really need you. I promise you in front of witnesses that you will never regret agreeing to marry me. And God knows I'm not lying right now, so please think carefully. You can take your time with your answer, but at least just promise me that you will think about it. Undoubtedly, everyone has a chance for a better life, and if a person has stumbled and fallen face down in the mud, many people can pass by indifferently. Especially callous souls will not be lazy to throw clods of mud at him, even if they have to get dirty themselves. There are also many of them, and only a few would not be afraid to lend a hand to help a man up." Amber realized that her luck, which everyone envied, hadn't gone anywhere. She'd had it with her all along. It was just that Caitlin hadn't realized exactly how lucky she was. Life had beaten her up pretty badly, shaken the crap out of her, but she looked at the world with sober eyes. She had a mother who had been looking for her for a year, when everyone she knew had long since given up on her and periodically only gossiped, and drank to the repose of her soul, rejoicing that they and their children had not had such a share. She had Michael, who really loved her, and only once offended her, unable to control his feelings and emotions. But Caitlin realized that she deserved it, because she had done no better to him in her time. And finally, she had a daughter, literally the hope for a new happy life with people who loved her. So Caitlin made a vow not to miss another chance given to her by fate. This was the meaning of further existence, which she had asked God for recently, and Caitlin thankfully stepped forward towards her future. America is all about the kitchen. Dawn and dusk spread a cozy light on the girl. She couldn't sleep. Very soon the truck would arrive to take things away from the apartment Jennifer had been renting for almost 8 years now. She'd come here as a young, inexperienced girl, just out of high school, just started university. Jennifer felt like a kid back then. Perhaps it was because her mother was still alive. Now Jennifer was a completely different person, an adult, knowing life, burdened with the baggage of experience. And she was even a little envious of her young, enthusiastic self. Then it seemed to her that only the best, brightest, most interesting things were ahead. At first it was so. Life in the city turned around. The girl spun a motley round dance of studies, new acquaintances, previously unexplored entertainment. It was fun. And then troubles fell on Jennifer's head one after another. She had to grow up quickly, take off the rose-colored glasses, struggle. Jennifer was born and raised in the town of Cedarville, located about 160 kilometers from the big city of Phoenix. Her childhood was just wonderful. Loving parents, numerous friends, faithful dog buddy, a mix of sheepdog and mongrel. What else does a child need for happiness? In the summer, Jennifer and her friends rode bicycles to the river and walked in the woods. In winter, the same company had fun riding down the mountains on sleds, or just cardboard and building huge snow forts. Jennifer always studied well. Studying was easy for her, and Mom was always there for her. If anything is unclear, will prompt, help explain. Dad was often absent at work. He worked as a driver on the local farm. He took produce to the city, or, on the contrary, delivered something from the city to the owner. Jennifer's father grabbed any part-time job to bring home more money, because his wife, after the birth of his daughter, left work to deal with the child. So the breadwinner of the family was one. Jennifer was indeed a long-awaited daughter. Her parents hadn't had a baby for years. What only they did not do, and the holy places traveled, and healing springs visited, and to a variety of herbalists went. This is, of course, after the official medicine gave the future mother Jennifer sentence infertility. Doctors did not leave a woman no chance that she will be able to get pregnant. They advised to resign or take a child from an orphanage. Only then the couple decided to go the unconventional way: witch doctors, monasteries, healers. In the end, the miracle still happened. True, at the time of the birth of their daughter, Jennifer's parents were already over 40. Their peers were waiting for grandchildren, and they just had a baby. Needless to say, the mother and father did not want to admire their little girl, could not admire her. Everything she did delighted and amazed them. Jennifer grew up with a sense of reliable rear behind her back, in an atmosphere of love and acceptance. When the girl became older, of course, she noticed that her friends' parents are young, beautiful, strong. Her parents are almost like grandparents. But Jennifer had never been stressed by this fact. On the contrary, she sympathized with her peers when she saw how their fathers and mothers treated them. Adults often yelled at the children, got annoyed, sometimes even hit, and called them names. Nothing like that ever happened in Jennifer's family. Her mother and father always respected their daughter's wishes and were very attentive to her. They asked how her day was, discussed Jennifer's problems together. The girl clearly knew home as a place where she will always understand, always support. This feeling was worth a lot. Her mother and father were happy that their girl was doing well in her studies. They set her up for further study at the university. They often talked to their daughter about the importance of higher education. "Go, my daughter," on the lawyer, reasoned the mother. "You will always have a piece of bread, and the work is important, respected. In a warm office we'll sit in. No way. I from early morning to the farm to stomp, then with frozen manure hands to deal with. Women's beauty, daughter. Physical work fades quickly. Listen to your mother, she's right," echoed her father. "Your head is well cooked, you will cope with everything." And this unconditional faith of her parents in the successful future of their daughter supported the girl, gave her strength, faith, and it began to seem that she, herself, of course, everything will work out. Often father and mother put their daughter as an example of the neighbor's son, Tom. He was a couple years older than Jennifer. A short, sturdy boy. Not handsome, like Betty, for instance, but very nice, very pleasant. Dark brown skin, dark brown intelligent eyes, thick brown hair. He looks very Italian, and just as smiling, friendly. Of course, Jennifer made up all her ideas about Italians from popular movies, and Tom looked just like their heroes. Tom was always different from the village kids. Instead of playing soccer with the boys, he spent his days and nights reading books from the local library. If it had been comic books, or even adventure novels, Jennifer would have understood. But the books Tom chose were strange anatomy guides and treatises on the structure of the human body. Sometimes Jennifer couldn't even read the titles of these books correctly, let alone understand them. Tom was the best student in school. He was especially distinguished in natural sciences, chemistry, biology. The boy often went to the city to the regional Olympiads in these subjects and never returned without a prize. No one was surprised when Tom entered the academy after finishing school, but not to the local nearest university, located in Agapov, but to the capital's university. Tom's parents were happy to share their son's success with the neighbors. As a student, he had already assisted a distinguished surgeon and written some important and complex work. In general, appreciated their Pine Tom metropolitan luminaries. Jennifer was both happy for her neighbor and a little sad. Tommy flew up so high you can't reach him. Jennifer liked that guy, except she never admitted it to him. First of all, she was too young for him. Secondly, that's the last thing you want to do. Hang yourself on a guy's neck. Jennifer's not like that. What was Jennifer's attraction to the boy next door? Well, for one thing, his kind and intelligent eyes. And then there was his calm demeanor, his inner strength and confidence. Tom seemed to know exactly what to do in any given situation. Tom was very different from the rest of the boys. It's just a pity that he didn't pay any attention to girls at all. He was always busy just studying. But sometimes he and Jennifer would talk. They lived near each other, so they'd come home from school together. They'd meet each other on the way home from the store, too, and they'd talk neighborly. They discussed, it seemed, everything in the world, the weather, what was happening in the village, cases and guys they knew. Sometimes they talked about world problems, mysticism and miracles. Jennifer had never had such interesting conversations with anyone. The girl would not mind to stop at the gate, to chat with Tom even a little more, but he always hurried home to his books and computer. Jennifer had never met such enthusiastic people before. These conversations were another reason why Jennifer was in love with her neighbor. Too bad he didn't need anything but his books in his life. It wasn't just Jennifer who liked Tom. There was something about him that attracted other girls to him, and they acted much more daring and uninhibited than the modest Jennifer. But all their attempts to attract Tom's attention were to no avail, and Jennifer quietly rejoiced at her rivals' failures and enjoyed their disappointment. Some girls, offended by Tom's neglect, spread rumors about him in the village, but no one believed them. Then Tom entered the university in the capital, left Sosnovka. He started a whole new life, and Jennifer realized she'd never see him again. The end of their friendship and interesting conversations. It made her very sad. But what could be done? Tom was held up as an example to all the Sosnovsky children, not just Jennifer. His name had become almost a household name. Study like Tom, then you'll get somewhere in life. Perhaps Tom, caught up in the whirlwind of his new life, never thought of his neighbors, but they often talked about him. The years flew by, and now Jennifer was a senior. The joyful event receiving a red certificate was overshadowed by the fact that the girl's father the day before went to the hospital with a heart attack. During the solemn line, at which the teachers spoke very warm and good words about Jennifer, he was in intensive care between life and death. Of course, Jennifer and her mother sat in the school auditorium as if on pins and needles. It was no time for celebration for both of them when a dear, beloved person was in such a state. Yes, this was not how Jennifer had envisioned this day. She had worked so hard, studied so hard to make her parents proud of her during the graduation. For the first time, the girl regretted that her mother and father were already so old. She used to be happy about it. Her adult parents were much more tolerant of her than her younger ones. But the situation with her father showed that elderly relatives are no longer distinguished by good health. Something could happen to them at any moment. My father spent all of June and half of July in a coma. He never learned that his daughter had enrolled in law school at State University. Then, at the height of the summer, Jennifer's father passed away in the hospital walls, never regaining consciousness. It was a huge blow for both the girl and her mother. But they were together, supported each other, consoled. Somehow they coped with grief, especially since they had a lot of things to do, and it distracted from sad thoughts. After the funeral, her mother and Jennifer together went to the city and chose an apartment where the girl was to live during her studies. It was a small studio apartment in an old 5-story building. The most fortunate thing was the location of the dwelling. The university was within walking distance. This meant that Jennifer would not have to spend every morning at the bus stop waiting for the right bus. A 10-minute walk and she was there. Jennifer was excited to be starting a new life. First of all, it's exciting and interesting. Secondly, it was easier to get over the loss of her father. After all, new experiences are distracting. Youth took its toll in the city. Jennifer recovered quickly, felt the joy of life again. She met new people. She even got a young man. Stephen, a student, took Jennifer to cafes and to the waterfront. They walked, holding hands, kissing. Their relationship was light, superficial. The girl understood it perfectly well. Neither Stephen had strong feelings for her, nor she for him, but both of them were satisfied with this state of affairs. It was customary to meet someone, so they met, expecting nothing special from this unburdensome relationship. Jennifer became friends with Jacqueline. She was at the same university, but in a different department. Some of the girls' lectures were held together. Jacqueline somehow forgot her fountain pen. Jennifer had a spare. That's how they met. Jacqueline lived in the city with her parents and suffered from their overprotection. Mother and father, according to the girl's assurances, controlled her every step, pressured the grown-up daughter, demanded complete obedience. And it pissed Jacqueline off, Jennifer said. That's why Jacqueline often stayed overnight at Jennifer's house in spite of her parents. I envy you. You live alone. No one's bothering you, Jacqueline sighed. Jennifer shook her head silently. She didn't argue with Jacqueline, she knew she wouldn't understand. Jennifer herself was desperately jealous of her friend. Her parents didn't seem evil or abnormal. They simply loved their daughter and were not indifferent to her fate. And Jacqueline did not understand her happiness. And it's so great to have both mom and dad around. Both young, healthy, energetic. The bitterness of her father's loss often made itself known, sometimes quite painfully. And my mom was troubling too. She had lost a lot of energy after the loss of her husband. Now mother often had headaches and high blood pressure. She tried not to worry her daughter, but she could see that her mother was not well. They often called each other via video call, and it was impossible to hide the painful appearance. When Jennifer was in her 3rd year of high school, fate dealt her another blow. Mom, Jennifer said. A stroke took her life. It happened right in front of her neighbor Samantha. She quickly called an ambulance, but the doctors were too late. Jennifer refused to accept this horrifying fact. Was she really alone in the world now? Another disadvantage of a late and only child is the lack of siblings. If her parents had had someone else, Jennifer would not have felt such an impossible emptiness inside after losing them. Jennifer was supported by the Clark family's neighbors at the time. They knew both the girl herself and her parents. It was these people who helped a confused Jennifer organize the funeral and wake. It was they who had suggested how to handle the inheritance. Jennifer was very grateful to them for that. But new acquaintances Stephen and Jacqueline turned out to be such a support. Stephen disappeared, unable to bear the weight of what Jennifer was going through. Because of the tragedy, Jacqueline still tried to distract her friend. But it was so pathetic and unsuccessful words and actions that Jennifer only got worse. Eventually, Jacqueline disappeared from Jennifer's apartment as well. You should probably be alone right now, shouldn't you? Well, you call if you need anything when you come to your senses, Jacqueline said. It was a rough patch. Jennifer had to pick herself back up from the ashes, but she got through it. Getting used to total loneliness was not easy. For a long time, Jennifer was drawn to call her mother to share the news or tell her about some problem. But slowly, Jennifer's life returned to normal. Now, instead of remittances from her mother, she received a survivor's pension. She was already an adult, but she was still a full-time university student. Jennifer was entitled to this benefit. The pension, together with the scholarship, allowed the girl to make ends meet, to pay rent, to eat, to buy the necessary things for her studies, to dress. Jennifer was graduating from the university, and her friend Jacqueline made different plans for the time after graduation. Some dreamed of traveling for a year, others thought of studying further. But Jennifer had only one option: to find a job. Immediately after receiving a diploma, payments from the state will cease, which means that Jennifer will have to provide for herself independently. Adulthood and responsibility were frightening. But where to go? You have to live somehow. Of course, Jennifer could not find a job as a lawyer. Who needs a lawyer with no experience? And her age and gender didn't play into Jennifer's hands. You're only 22? The woman in human resources asked. She's young. Now I'll take you, you'll get married, then maternity, then the second. And after that, endless sick days. We know the type. Other recruiters might not have been so frank, but Jennifer could tell from their looks and facial expressions. No one wanted to hire a young girl with no experience. Teach her, then pay her maternity and sick leave. Jennifer tried to convince her employers that she wasn't going to get married, she had no one. And she doesn't want to rush into having children. She realizes that she needs to get on her feet first. But it was all for nothing. As a result, the girl decided to lower the bar of requirements for future work. It is not necessary to work in a specialty. The main thing is to be paid. So Jennifer stood behind the cash register at the supermarket, replenished the army of specialists with diplomas, forced to work in unskilled positions. What to do? Jennifer Agapova did not have it so easy with employment. One could, of course, return to her hometown of Fleming. At least she had her own place to live. Jennifer often thought about her home. Life in Fleming is much more measured, quiet, understandable. Fleming is Fleming. Not like Los Angeles with its frantic rhythm. But where do you work there? What, go to a farm? Jennifer can't do any of that. Hands aren't made for physical labor. And she can't do heavy labor. Jennifer wasn't used to country life. At least in the city, you could always get a job as a cashier. There are so many supermarkets growing everywhere like mushrooms after rain. Jennifer's own life seemed dreary and dull. Indeed, there was little joy in it. Early rise, a trip in a crowded bus to the other side of the city. Then the work was long, exhausting, monotonous. At the same time, it was necessary to be extremely careful, because any shortage was deducted from Jennifer's salary. But the hardest part was dealing with people. Jennifer was supposed to behave impeccably, politely, even with the most dissatisfied customers. So the girl had to endure rudeness and outright insults, accusations of distrust, slowness and other sins. Cashier. How do you put up with it? Jacqueline was indignant. If I were you, I would have left a long time ago. They were friends again, because Jacqueline was still fighting with her parents, and she needed a place to sleep after she proudly slammed the door. Jacqueline herself worked as an accountant at the firm her father had set her up with. His connections helped, because inexperienced accountants from the street, just like inexperienced lawyers, were not very popular. Jacqueline told Jennifer how hard the job was for her. You have to learn everything. You have to run on the parcels of the senior, listen to the comments from the bosses. Of course, Jacqueline had loving and caring parents, so she could not understand Jennifer. Jacqueline lived in her own pleasure, but her friend had to survive. Jennifer wished she had a strong male shoulder to lean on, a man with whom to share all the hardships of this lonely adult life. Reliable, wise, faithful. But where would one find such a man? Jennifer looked around carefully, but saw no one suitable. At work, she tried to court the loader Michael, a young, handsome guy who worked part-time at the mall after graduating from university. But Michael, he is not serious, and on such a one cannot rely. He has only partying on his mind and entertainment. The boy had time not only to court Jennifer, but also to pay attention to other girls. No, that's not what Jennifer wanted. Jacqueline, she really got serious. She met a young man at work. I think he was the head of some department. They were dating. This Phil took Jacqueline on dates to restaurants, complimented her, gave her expensive gifts. And then he proposed. Jennifer was genuinely happy for her friend. Only on her background even more acutely felt their own loneliness and worthlessness. Jennifer attended the wedding of Jacqueline and Phil. The groom's friends were looking at the pretty bridesmaid with interest, but they were all with their other halves, and Jennifer, as always, alone. One of these guests, Phil's buddies, Henry the First Think, looked tipsy. He trailed Jennifer down a narrow hallway, grabbed her with his strong hands, pulled her against him, and whispered in her ear, fuming the frightened girl with fumes of booze, obscene suggestions, literally begging her to become his mistress. Promised golden mountains, full content, only to keep everything secret. Jennifer forcefully pushed the rude man away from her. The mood was irrevocably ruined. Jennifer tried to get acquainted with men on the internet. She wrote at once that she was interested only in serious, long-term relationships with the prospect of creating a family. This probably cut off some of the frivolous candidates, but obviously not all of them. Jennifer had a string of unsuccessful dates. She could probably write an interesting book about them, or at least a big article. Maybe you're not acting that way, Jacqueline said thoughtfully, listening to her friend. There's no such thing as everyone turning out to be such assholes. It just doesn't happen. Her friend's words hurt Jennifer's heart. She wanted something else: support, understanding. And Jacqueline actually said that Jennifer was to blame for everything, that it was something wrong with her, not with men. Maybe that was true. Jacqueline would know. Jacqueline had everything worked out perfectly, both in her profession and in her marriage. She and her husband moved into their own apartment with a mortgage. Now she was expecting a baby. Jennifer was happy for her friend, who one by one made her dreams come true. And she hoped, desperately hoping that she would one day be as lucky. For now, her life was chaos, loneliness, moneylessness, uninteresting, monotonous work. Then Jacqueline had a baby, and the friends began to see each other much more often. The young mother was tired, unable to cope with the baby. The husband, according to Jacqueline, she did not help her at all, she complained. And on my parents I am very offended. They themselves asked for grandchildren and father, and mother-in-law promised to help. But as soon as I gave birth, that's it. There is no one. Alone with a baby. I struggle like a fish against the ice, malnourished and sleep-deprived. And he's cranky. I can't take it anymore. At first, Jennifer came to help her friend with the baby once a week. The girl quickly learned to manage the baby. It turned out that nothing was so difficult. Jacqueline enjoyed her visits. She boiled the kettle, put treats on the table, and put the newborn in her friend's care. She'd go for a bath. Then Jacqueline started calling more and more. She had to go to the dentist or to the stores, and as always, there was no one to leave the baby with. So Jennifer put aside her own business and drove to her friend's house. She was tired to work, household chores, but she didn't want to refuse Jacqueline. The girl understood that her friend would definitely take offense. After all, Jacqueline was the only close person for Jennifer. She didn't want to lose her too. And in general, friends should really help each other. That's called friendship, right? In the presence of Jacqueline's husband, Phil, Jennifer felt uncomfortable every time. It seemed that he was unhappy with his wife and the fact that her friend was in their apartment so often. Sometimes young people quarreled right in front of Jennifer, and then the girl did not know where to go from shame. Phil and Jacqueline accused each other of the same thing: laziness, lack of support and help. Yeah. After all, before the baby was born, their family had seemed perfect to Jennifer. Maybe it was just an appearance, and then suddenly, out of the blue, another inventory of the supermarket's cash register revealed a huge shortfall. It looked like Jennifer was the culprit. The girl, hearing the amount of her debt, stunned. She even felt a little sick to her stomach. She didn't have that kind of money. She'd have to work for 6 months for free to pay it all off, without eating, drinking, or paying rent. So how come? Jennifer tried to justify herself to her boss. This is a mistake. It couldn't have happened to me. I count everything carefully. I mean, I've worked for you guys for so long. This has never happened before. The boss looked at Jennifer accusingly, distant. She was usually much more friendly to her, as if she were a long-time, trusted employee. What do we do now? Jennifer asked. What? Pay off the shortfall. Otherwise, you're looking at a criminal case for embezzlement or theft. I don't know exactly how they classify that nowadays. Either way, you'd be in a lot of trouble. But I don't even have that kind of money, the girl objected. Maybe I'll pay it back somehow? I'll give you half of my salary. We'll pay it off gradually. The boss shook her head negatively. The money should be in the cashier's office in the near future. We can't do it in installments. But where will I get it? I don't know. Borrow it from someone or take out a loan. Jennifer thought about it. A loan? The interest rates are insane. It would take the lion's share of your paycheck. Borrow? She probably couldn't borrow. Just at that moment, the phone rang demandingly in her jeans pocket. Jacqueline's number popped up on the screen. I see. She had to babysit again. And then it hit Jennifer, of course, it's Jacqueline. A friend of hers had boasted more than once that when she went on maternity leave, as a conscious and intelligent woman, she had managed to build up a financial cushion just in case. I'm sure she'll help me out of trouble. We're so close. Especially lately. And Jennifer? Of course, she'd try to pay her friend back as soon as possible. Only the interest wouldn't have to be overpaid. How much she takes, she'll pay back. It's a way out. Lucky you. Jacqueline's tired voice echoed through the phone. The background was the demanding cry of a baby. But I need to go away for a couple of hours in the evening. You come after work and sit, and I'll be there. Thank you. You're the best friend ever. Jennifer had no doubt that Jacqueline would help her out. After all, they were almost like sisters. Jennifer herself helped her a lot and let her stay overnight when Jacqueline quarreled with her parents and proudly left the house, and babysat the baby as much as she could. Jennifer took it for granted that her friend would help her in a difficult situation, especially since she had the opportunity to do so. But when she heard the request, Jacqueline somehow immediately tensed up, her lips tightened, and she froze in her chair. That's the way it is, Jennifer summarized the story of the shortfall. I'm in such a difficult situation. There's no one to help me. You're my only hope. Jennifer was very uncomfortable to address her friend with such a request, but what else could she do? You see, Jennifer, there's no way I can help you out. I'm sorry, Jacqueline said. Why not? The question came out of Jennifer's mouth before she had a chance to think about it. Of course, she felt she had no right to ask her friend such a question. Why? Jacqueline began to get annoyed. First of all, we have a mortgage with Phil. You know, his job isn't always stable. So these savings of mine are being spent slowly. And then there's the baby, the diapers, the formula. You don't know how expensive all that stuff is. I understand, Jennifer nodded. Her last hope for a favorable resolution to the situation melted away. Jacqueline is unable to help her. That's too bad. So you can't babysit after this rejection? Jacqueline asked quietly, her eyes downcast. No way. Jennifer shook her hands. How could you even think such a thing? Of course I'll babysit. We're friends. Jennifer had to take out a loan. Her already modest life became even more austere. The girl took part-time jobs, spent days and nights at work. In her spare time, Jacqueline was also babysitting. Meanwhile, Jacqueline got a new car. The old car was worn out, and now Jacqueline was driving around in a foreign car from the showroom, new, glossy, beautiful, like a toy. Her friend described the merits of her new car without end. Jennifer listened, nodded, smiled, and tried not to think about how Jacqueline had assured her a few weeks ago that almost all her savings had melted away, that she and Phil were in need themselves. So Jacqueline could have lent her friend money, but she didn't. Well, Jennifer understood perfectly well that Jacqueline should not have given up her dream of a new car for her. It was such a personal matter. Jacqueline could do with her money as she pleased. She didn't owe Jennifer anything. There's nothing to be offended about. Jennifer wasn't offended. She still went to her friend's house in her spare time to help her with the baby. That way the girl felt like she wasn't alone. She seemed to have people close to her. Otherwise, it was completely dark. Summer, and the most beautiful season of the year, the golden fall, flew by quickly. The cold came. It was only then that Jennifer came to her senses. It turns out that she has nothing to wear. The old jacket has completely fallen into disrepair, and even a stain on it Jennifer planted. Something did not take it. In general, there is an urgent need to update the closet. And with what? Jennifer's entire salary was spent on rent and loan payments. She ate beets, bread, and the cheapest pasta and canned goods. How could she afford to buy new clothes on a budget like that? And yet you have to wear something, right? The solution, Jacqueline said, is to go to the flea market. What? Jennifer didn't understand. Well, there's one near the train station, where the fountain used to be, remember? People gather, sell used stuff. I'm sure you'll find something. Nothing to do. On her day off, Jennifer went to the flea market. Even the name flea market scared her away. It seemed that the things there would be so dirty and unpleasant that you couldn't even touch them. But Jennifer was wrong. The market looked nothing like she'd imagined it. Straight rows and tall stalls, just like a normal bazaar, and the stuff was quite decent. Dishes, clothes, toys, antiques. Jennifer looked at them with particular interest. It was like walking through a museum. Plastic dolls from her Soviet childhood, books and antique bindings. Someone was even selling a gramophone, a real rarity. But Jennifer was primarily interested in outerwear. And so she finally came upon the right row. There was a lot of stuff here. Brightly colored short jackets, good down jackets, even fur coats. But her attention was immediately attracted by the coat, elegant, stylish, beautiful, soft blue color. The thing looked like new, no scuffs, no stains, no holes. The size seemed to be just right. Jennifer looked at the salesperson. She was a woman in her 50s. Did you like the coat, daughter? She smiled. Try it on, try it on. I think it will fit you. I can see at once this thing is yours. And my eye knows it's already there. Jennifer tried on the coat and realized the saleswoman was right. The coat fit right. The girl even admired herself in the mirror. The saleswoman named the price. Jennifer could not believe her ears. It was just pennies. She could easily afford a beautiful coat. She couldn't even believe her luck. She was leaving the flea market in that sky blue coat. Suddenly it was cold, and she didn't want to put on an old jacket after the elegant thing. Jennifer felt different in beautiful clothes, more confident, relaxed, happy, finally. It seemed like such a small thing, but how does it affect her mood? Jennifer felt like everyone was looking at her and admiring her. Or maybe that was how it really was. A pretty girl with a slight smile on her lips, wearing a beautiful coat. People like that certainly attracted attention. Jennifer decided to get off the bus early and walk the stop. At the same time, to buy something tasty at the store on the way. Sometimes you could treat yourself once in a while. And at that very moment, when Jennifer was hurrying to the grocery store, she was called by a high voice, either a woman's or a child's. Girl in the blue coat. The girl shouted. Jennifer thought it wasn't her. But again, the girl in the blue coat. Jennifer slowly turned around. She saw a gypsy girl of about 15 at the empty bus stop. She was the one who'd called her. Tall, dark-haired, snow-white teeth, long black braids, decorated with some beads and thin ribbons, came out from under her shawl. The girl was wearing a short jacket and a floor-length skirt. On her feet were massive sneakers. Jennifer started toward the girl, but the girl took off and hurried toward Jennifer. Finally, they met near a lamppost. "Let me read your fortune," pretty girl said the gypsy. Of course, the girl was just trying to make money off her. But the young gypsy girl won't succeed. She's a bad fortune teller if she can't see that her potential client has no money at all. "I'm just telling fortunes," the girl said suddenly, her black eyes scrutinizing Jennifer. "For free. I'm rich. I'm just learning. I need to practice." Jennifer grinned. She couldn't help thinking that she was a young con artist, that she was just trying to get her teeth into her mouth to steal her purse. But then the girl would be in for a big disappointment. There was nothing there to take. "I see you don't trust her." The gypsy was a chatty girl. "All right, then I'll tell you a little about your past. Then you'll realize that I'm not deceiving you." "Well, tell me," Jennifer nodded. "Shall I give you a hand? The palm of your hand? Can you read the palm of my hand?" "You cheer me up," girl laughed the gypsy. "These are all grandmother's fairy tales. What palm? I don't need a palm. I can see everything in your beautiful eyes." "Well, I'm listening." Jennifer was relaxed for some reason. The girl was so nice and friendly that she has completely relaxed her interlocutor. "I can see that your life is not easy. Loneliness. I see losses in your past. Serious losses," the gypsy woman said. "Oh, they were people very close to you. Your parents, I guess, right?" The fortune teller looked sympathetically at Jennifer, who nodded affirmatively. Surprisingly, the girl had accurately read her past. "But you didn't give up, you didn't break," continued the young gypsy. "You are strong. And you won't break. You have no one now. And you're sad. It's hard for you to be alone. Just know that your life is about to change. It's already starting to change. You just don't see it yet, do you?" Jennifer looked at the gypsy with hope. Of course, she nodded. "I can see it in your eyes. Soon you'll have money, lots of money. You'll forget about poverty once, and for all you'll be able to spend as much as you want. Oh, you'll be lucky soon." "I wish I were," Jennifer smiled. "I like your prediction. I can't wait." "It will be soon," the girl replied seriously. "I can see that you don't believe it, and you want to believe it, but you can't yet. You'll remember my words. True, it is not money that will bring you happiness. The main thing is something else. Later, a little later. You'll meet your man. He's already looking for you everywhere. He'll find you soon. You'll be happy. Oh, I see children. Shall I tell you how many babies you'll have?" "No, I'd rather have a surprise. My grandmother used to say you can't tell people the whole truth. No details. Just generalities and innuendos." These prophecies of the novice fortune teller made Jennifer's soul warm, and tears began to gather in her eyes. There was a feeling that this gypsy just read her dreams and voiced them. Maybe it was the young girl's inexperience. She had admitted that she was a novice fortune teller. Maybe she just confused Jennifer's dreams with her future. That's all. "No, I'm not wrong. Not that much ever, the gypsy protested. Jennifer even flinched in surprise. Had she read her mind? Goosebumps ran down her spine. When will all this happiness suddenly descend on me? Jennifer asked the question. Well, we can't say for sure, the gypsy answered. But we won't have long to wait. I'll give you a hint, though it would be a very rude intervention, said the gypsy. But you will come to everything on your own just after a while. I'll give you a hint right away. Anyway, it's all about that new coat of yours. There's something in it. Take a look. Look for it at home. Pay attention. Wow. Jennifer smiled. What am I supposed to be looking for? You'll find out, the gypsy said evasively. I've told you too much already. You'll be all right. Don't be afraid of anything and believe in good things. All right, thank you, Jennifer nodded. The girl waved goodbye and hurried somewhere behind the bus stop to board. Jennifer watched her until the gypsy girl was out of sight behind the trees. Not that the girl believed the young fortune teller's prediction. No, of course not. And yet, at home, the first thing Jennifer did was to examine the coat, searching through the pockets, both main and hidden, and scrutinizing the collar. Then, she guessed, she started probing the lining. And that's when her fingers found a rustling piece of paper. Maybe it's a big bill, Jennifer thought. The gypsy promised me a lot of money. Maybe the old coat was the old owner's stash. I could really use the money now. The girl carefully slipped her fingers into the lining of the coat so that it would be easy to sew it up, and extracted not a large bill, as she had hoped, but a note. A note, written in quick, messy handwriting on a scrap of paper. The thought flashed through her mind that it was an instruction manual for finding treasure. The gypsy woman had promised riches, but the content of the note shocked Jennifer. Please help. Read the girl. Don't think this is a joke or an evil prank. He has kidnapped me. He's keeping me locked up in the basement, making me fix old things that I think he's selling later. I'm in a village. It's not far from town. I don't know the name. But I managed to notice that there is a sign nearby that says 153 kilometers. I don't know what that means, the note continued. His house is somewhere on the edge of the village. It's always quiet here, no one lives nearby. Just behind the house is a forest or a plantation. I don't know what it is, he'll kill me like the others. Help me, please. Jennifer's breath caught. Her hands trembled. There was a pounding in her temples. Whoever had written this person was in danger, and in such fear that she didn't even want to imagine it. What was there to do? Jennifer had no doubt that the note was not a joke, but a real cry for help. And the girl made the only right decision, put on her new coat again, and went to the nearest police station. At first, no one wanted to listen to Jennifer. She was brushed off, sent home. The kids are just kidding around. You wouldn't understand, a pot-bellied policeman with tired, red eyes told her. Their jokes are so stupid. I have a lot of experience. Do you know how many jokers I've seen? But Jennifer stood her ground. The girl knew that the person who left the secret message had only her. Only Jennifer could save him or her from captivity. For we must act quickly. There was no telling how long the note had been in her coat. It is possible that it is already too late to do anything at all, but I did not want to think about it. Finally, one of the young operatives, Henry, agreed to take Jennifer's statement. Henry, you're a fool to take on unnecessary problems, his older colleagues told him. The operative listened to Jennifer, wrote down her statement, took the note from her, and walked the girl to the exit, promising that he would keep her informed. She was a witness in the case, and her presence and testimony would still be needed. The girl kept trying to find out from him on the way out whether he was not deceiving her, whether he was trying to get rid of an annoying visitor. The policeman assured her that everything would be all right and he would take care of it. Well, Jennifer had no choice but to rely on this young man. She had done everything in her power. Now it was up to them, the enforcers of the law. Not 4 days after Jennifer's visit to the station, she received a phone call from the very same operative, Henry, inviting her to a meeting. The girl even had to take a day off from work, although in her position it was quite frivolous to take a vacation at her own expense. Well, the policeman greeted Jennifer with a friendly smile. Thanks to you, a very high-profile case has been solved. Have you heard about Clark's daughter? Jennifer nodded. Who hadn't heard of her? Clark was a major figure in their town. Co-owner of the town's steel mill. He was also an MP, rich, famous, powerful. Every now and then there'd be a picture of him, a video of him. And about 3 months ago, a terrible thing happened. His teenage daughter went missing. A 16-year-old girl who'd never been denied anything. She was studying at a prestigious language grammar school, constantly vacationing abroad. The girl was assigned a driver and a guard. How come she disappeared? No one understood. Peyton was Clark's daughter's name, the operative continued. It was as if she vanished into thin air, disappeared in that brief moment when no one was watching her. On the way from the school gate to the car with the guard and driver. There were a lot of theories. Many believed that Clark's rivals had decided to influence him through his daughter. They carefully planned the kidnapping, took the girl away, hid her. Except for one thing. The thing is, no one ever contacted Clark. If his daughter had been kidnapped for ransom or manipulation, the intruders would have long ago voiced their will to the unhappy father, and those were silent. According to another version, Peyton simply ran away from home on her own, away from an influential father, controlling mother, from guards, drivers, and endless circles and sections. The child wanted freedom, a different life. Or maybe love intervened in the case in general. These versions people in social networks people discussed with particular eagerness, because this version of the girl's disappearance seemed the most romantic, reminiscent of a TV series or a movie. Clark searched for his daughter, but in vain. There was no sign of her anywhere. Peyton had vanished into thin air. The desperate father even put up posters around town, and he's been promising ridiculous sums of money for any information on the girl. Of course, Jennifer knew Peyton Clark's story and couldn't help but know it. So did she asked. Did Peyton write that note that was in my coat? Investigator Henry nodded and shone even brighter. We saved the girl. We did. She's alive and well. She's in the hospital now. She's exhausted and had a nervous breakdown. But that's okay. Daddy's going to make sure she gets a decent rehab. She'll be as good as new. There's some papers you need to sign. You have an important role in this case. You're a witness. It was your testimony that helped save that girl. Jennifer got chills down her spine. I mean, really, if she hadn't bought that coat and met a gypsy on the way, that's someone worthy of gratitude. If it hadn't been for the young fortune teller's words, there's no telling when Jennifer would have discovered the note under the lining. Or maybe she wouldn't have found it at all. Or maybe she would have washed the coat and the text would have blurred, become unreadable. The young gypsy girl was also directly involved in Peyton's fate. But what is it? Jennifer wondered. Had I encountered something mystical and inexplicable? Is it all true? Is there something in the world that is beyond human comprehension? But the girl decided to think about this thought later. Now she was very interested in the details of Peyton's rescue. What happened to the girl, to Peyton? What happened to her? What happened to her? Why did she disappear? Jennifer asked. There must be such an interesting story there. The investigator pulled a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and looked at her questioningly, saying if she minded. Jennifer nodded. From the looks of it, it was going to be a long conversation. But she wasn't in any hurry. She had a full day off anyway. The investigator's speech flowed smoothly and measuredly. He was a great storyteller. Young Peyton Clark was accustomed from an early age to having her every wish granted. He began. You want an expensive toy? No problem. A designer dress? No problem. Recording a music video in a real studio was also doable. The only thing the girl lacked was freedom. All her days were scheduled literally by minute studies, extra classes and sections. And Peyton was already a grown-up girl. She wanted love and friendship, freedom. She wanted to know the world better. And behind the fence of the mansion it so beckoned seemed so interesting, full of adventures and bright events. And one day Peyton ran away, slipped away after school from the vigilant guards and driver, waiting for her, as always, at the fence of the elite gymnasium car. Peyton walked, just wandered around the city, sat in cafes, met people, talked to street musicians, and even danced with them in the underpass, feeling incredibly happy and free. It was a wonderful day. Everyone around her seemed so kind, so friendly, and so real. Her father's words about man being a wolf to man seemed to be some kind of heresy. Peyton even decided that she understood more about life than her influential parent. He's so mature and serious, still hasn't figured out what's what. Not like Peyton. And then Peyton met a guy. She thought he was cute and very charming. He was tall, smiling, and a little simple-minded, modest, not at all like the boys Peyton was used to socializing with. They were arrogant and self-loving. But this stranger came up to her, introduced himself as Jaden, and gave her a few sweet and touching compliments. It made young, inexperienced Peyton dizzy. Jaden was carrying a huge backpack on his shoulders. He told the girl that he sold second-hand items at the market in the underpasses for a living. Peyton volunteered to help him. Jaden told an amazing story about himself. I grew up in an orphanage. I didn't know my parents. I had to endure a lot of things as a kid. And then as a teenager, I went through fire, water, and bricks and mortar. Peyton listened to chilling stories of poverty, street fights, and trying to find her parents. By evening, Peyton agreed to ride with Jaden to his house. He said he lived in an apartment in an old building on the outskirts of town. The girl already considered the man a close friend. Jaden skillfully put the new acquaintance at ease. Peyton sat down in his car, an old Lada that had outlived its useful life. Jaden offered her a sip of water. She gladly accepted. They had recently eaten shawarma from a stall, and now Peyton was thirsty. As soon as she took a few sips, everything around her began to spin at breakneck speed. Peyton clutched at Jaden's sleeve to keep from falling. She felt violently nauseous. Then darkness. Memories came back in snatches. Peyton opens her eyes and sees the car turn off on a country road at a pole marked mile marker 153. Jaden pulls her, powerless, immobilized, out of the cabin, hoists her onto his shoulder, and carries her into the house. Peyton notices that the house is on the edge of a long village street. Just beyond the fence begins either a forest or a plantation. Peyton finally woke up in the basement, dark, damp, but equipped with everything necessary: a bed, a bucket, a toilet, a table with a strange machine. Later it turned out to be a sewing machine. Jaden even taught Peyton how to use it quite skillfully. Jaden turned out to be the kind of freak you don't want to argue with. Physically strong, abnormal. Peyton tried to run away several times, but the younger man easily twisted and immobilized her. Beal. The girl realized that Jaden wasn't even hitting at half strength. Later came the realization that it was best not to cross him. Jaden. If Peyton didn't fight back, he wasn't doing anything wrong. Every day the kidnapper brought the girl lunch and dinner. In the evenings, the man asked Peyton to read him stories. It was strange and scary. A grown man listened to magical stories from a thick book with his mouth open in amazement. Jaden also taught Peyton how to patch up worn clothes. He sold them in the underpasses or at the market. Peyton saw that as the key to salvation. The girl was good, and it seemed that she hid the notes in secret places in her clothes, closed them in the lining, put them in a button, and only found them under the collar, nodded the policeman, who had already taken a second drag from his cigarette. Well done. If it hadn't been for that, she'd still be in the basement, or Jaden would have killed her by now. Peyton's not the first person to live in this basement. Turns out she had predecessors. Jaden's dangerous. Very. Taking girls, making them read him fairy tales, fixing the clothes he sells. I don't know where he got the stuff. Maybe he stole it. Maybe he scavenged. Jaden fed the captives, took care of them, enjoyed his power over living things. And then he'd get bored with the next toy. He'd get rid of it and go looking for a new one. What a horror. Jennifer whispered. She couldn't imagine the horror Peyton felt, being in the basement alone with that monster. Now you realize what a scary man you stopped. The investigator looked at Jennifer seriously. The girl noted that he somehow unnoticeably for himself switched to you, as if this story brought them closer together, made them, if not friends, then at least allies. Peyton wasn't the only one who did the world a big favor. She could have ignored the note, thrown it away, and that was the end of it, or given up when the station didn't believe you right away. I know that story, how they chased you from office to office, didn't want to listen to you. It's scary to think if you'd given up and left. Jennifer nodded and shivered. It made her uncomfortable to think of people like Jaden walking the earth. They didn't stand out from the crowd. You never know if they're just a man or a beast. Peyton's dad, Clark. He found out about you too, and he wants to meet you. Why? It's got Jennifer all excited. I think he wants to thank you, the investigator said. And don't you dare say no. You deserve it. It turned out that Clark was here at the station. He had something to sign, someone to talk to. Jennifer recognized him as soon as he walked into the office. She'd seen him so many times in photos and videos. Now she was seeing him in person. Clark silently walked over to Jennifer and put his arm around her. It was unexpected. He hugged her tightly, in a fatherly way. This powerful and important man was so simple and natural. They talked for a long time. First, Clark talked about the state he'd been in during those months when his daughter had been in the middle of nowhere. It was obvious that it was important for him to talk. Jennifer listened, watching, nodding sympathetically. Then it was Jennifer's turn to monologue. She told the man about her financial predicament, about the used coat and the gypsy. At first she was hesitant to let Clark in on such details. Maybe he wouldn't believe her, think she was crazy. But the man did. He believed in the gypsy and in her amazing clue prophecy. He too believed that he owed his daughter's salvation to something inexplicable, incomprehensible, in a word, a miracle. Clark's cell phone was ringing off the hook. The man was obviously in a hurry, but he wanted to talk to Jennifer in detail and thoroughly. "You're a good, kind, decent girl," Clark finally said. And Jennifer realized that their conversation was coming to a close. Most importantly, she cared. And it was your caring that saved not only my Peyton, but a lot of other girls who would have been after her. I'm sure of it, and I thank you. Of course. You won't need it anymore. The gypsy was right too. I'll close your loan debt today and transfer the amount to you. Of course, money can't measure my gratitude, but I like to think that I did something for you too. Clark kept his promise. Only an hour later, Jennifer received a text message on her phone from the bank. When she saw the amount on the screen, she couldn't believe her eyes. Having such a fortune was something she had yet to get used to. Jennifer's life changed dramatically after she became a wealthy girl. The first thing she did was to quit her job at the supermarket and look for a job calmly and thoroughly. Nothing was driving her now. She was in poverty. So she could take her time. And she found a job. And what a job! First of all, it was legal work, which was Jennifer's profession. Secondly, it was remote. Thirdly, it was high-paying. Paradoxically, she'd started earning good money at a time when she didn't need the money at all. Clark's gratitude turned out to be not only a reliable financial cushion, but also the capital, bringing good bank interest. And then there was the paycheck. Jennifer could finally afford something she'd dreamed of for so long. She got her driver's license and bought a car. She got beautiful dresses, expensive shoes, and even jewelry. The girl thought about buying an apartment. She could afford any real estate in this city, but something stopped her. Jennifer wasn't sure she wanted to stay in Sport City. It had once seemed that having money was the key to a happily wealthy life, but it turned out that wealth was also somewhat of a challenge. Becoming wealthy, Jennifer was very disappointed in people. Close friends showed themselves not from the best sides. Jacqueline was the one who first distinguished herself. Of course, Jennifer immediately told her friend about what happened to her. Immediately after leaving the police station, she was so eager to share the extraordinary story she had been a part of. She was overwhelmed with emotion. Jacqueline took her friend's story badly and regretted that she had not been in Jennifer's shoes. She could use Clark's gratitude too. She'd been wanting a fur coat for a long time. A trip to the seaside and the latest model of cell phone. Jacqueline's attitude toward Jennifer had changed. Her friend had become more attentive, alert, and polite. Now she often complimented Jennifer, and before she had only made jokes about her appearance and behavior. Jennifer realized with annoyance that Jacqueline was almost groveling before her as a rich and therefore powerful woman, belittling herself and elevating her friend to make her feel like a real queen. Why? The answer did not have to wait long. On New Year's Eve, Jacqueline, in a pitiful voice, ordered a gold set from a famous brand as a gift. Even sent her a link to it. It was, to put it mildly, unpleasant. Jennifer still gave the bling to her friend then. But since then, the girl tried to stay away from Jacqueline. It was simply disgusting to look into her insincere eyes and listen to flattering compliments. No, it didn't feel like friendship at all. Jennifer suddenly had an epiphany. She remembered how Jacqueline had used her, Their entire relationship had been based on the favors Jennifer had done for Jacqueline. First, she'd given her an apartment and written her term papers. Then she'd babysat Jacqueline's baby like a free nanny. Now the gifts. Jennifer felt so alone, so weak and defenseless. She needed someone of her own. Jacqueline took shameless advantage of that. But when Jennifer needed help for the only time in her life, when she urgently needed money to pay off a debt, Jacqueline had refused her, even though she could have borrowed money and delayed the purchase of a new car. Clearly, she didn't have to. But still, Jennifer did everything for her on demand. It was a very one-sided relationship. So now Jennifer tried not to pick up the phone when her friend called and refused to have a friendly sit-down at the restaurant. These friendly meetings always followed the same script. Jacqueline ordered delicacies, dishes, and expensive drinks for the two of them. Then she would paint her unhappy life in colors, hinting at Jennifer to solve one or another of her problems. And after the bill was settled, of course, Jennifer would foot the bill. Jennifer now tried not to see Jacqueline and felt lonely and cheated. Yes, she had money, she had a good job. Now she could buy herself anything she wanted, but in a strange way, she didn't feel any happier. The novelty of the sensation was gone, and Jennifer felt the longing for her nearest and dearest people again. And there were none. The second part of the fortune teller's prophecy gave hope. Jennifer's happiness would be brought by meeting a man who was already looking for her. The young fortune teller promised love, marriage, and even children. Well, this man should probably be helped. The proverb that fate and fate will find behind the stove never liked the girl. Her nature was so active, energetic. What stove? In an effort to find her man, Jennifer went on dates with one of the cavaliers from the internet. She even had a long-term affair. Justin turned out to be sensitive and understanding. It was as if he read Jennifer's thoughts, anticipated her desires, saw through the girl. Later, it turned out that this was practically the case. Justin was one of the best graduates of the school, which trained professional catchers. They were taught how to properly communicate with wealthy women and achieve their goals through them. Jennifer was well aware that there were such educational institutions for ladies, but she was definitely not ready before a school for men. Jennifer closed Justin's loan and offered to help him herself, not realizing that she was being skillfully led to this decision, pushed. Then she gave Justin a motorcycle for the new year. This is the dream of her lover, speed and wind, the roar of the engine in her ears. The girl so wanted to make a loved one happy. Then she also gave him a considerable amount of money for business development. Well, of course, a man should feel like a breadwinner. Jennifer also rejoiced that her beloved now will be engaged in an important business, find himself. Nothing with the business did not work out, the money disappeared. Jennifer then calmed down the failed businessman, urged him not to get upset. Yes, Justin really turned out to be a worthy student. He'd managed to masterfully bamboozle his lady. It was costing Jennifer a lot of money. The money she'd gotten from Clark was melting away like snow in the April sun. One of her new co-workers opened her eyes to Justin. Jennifer shared her happiness with acquaintances, showed pictures of Justin, told a lot about him. The whole office knew Jennifer's young man in absentia. "Are not your handsome guy by any chance last night at the club rocked?" Chloe asked one Monday. The girl from work, who always handed Jennifer the documents at the beginning of the week. Jennifer then had to process them until Friday at home. "No, Justin went to see his mom yesterday. No, she's in a regional town and she's not feeling well. So he visited her," Chloe grinned, handing Jennifer her smartphone. There was an interesting photo on the screen. In the semi-darkness of the club was captured a passionate couple. Stylish, handsome Justin was holding a bright, dark brunette against him, and it wasn't a friendly embrace at all. Jennifer, gazing at the couple, tried to find proof that it was not Justin, but just a young man who looked like him. But it was Justin that Chloe had captured. He was wearing a shirt, which Jennifer herself gave him an expensive, stylish, branded shirt. Jennifer didn't confront Justin that evening. No, she didn't want to ruin the illusion of family in a warm relationship so badly that she procrastinated until the last minute. Still, Jennifer looked more closely at Justin now and began to notice details she hadn't seen before. That's how the truth about her lover came to light. Justin is a professional womanizer who lives off women. Before Jennifer, he generally was a 55-year-old widow of a famous businessman met. For him, there were no moral values, love, and feelings. It was hard to realize this truth. Jennifer felt unwanted and used. Justin was only with her for the money. Apparently, Jennifer was nothing in and of herself. Clark's money was the only thing that made her attractive to both her friends and young men. Jennifer found the strength to kick Justin out. It had been a little easier, but still the heavy thoughts now followed her relentlessly. She couldn't trust people anymore. Her best friend had turned out to be greedy and mercantile. Her lover was just an Alfonso. Everyone wanted money from her. It was like Jennifer didn't even exist, like she was nothing. The city weighed on her. She had to socialize with someone, smile at people, and wonder every time whether this or that person really treated her well, or whether it was all about her money. In the end, Jennifer came to what she thought was a wonderful decision. She would leave town. What would she do here? Her job is remote. Twice a week, Jennifer will be able to go to the office Monday to pick up the paperwork, Friday to drop off the processed paperwork. That's more than enough. And Jennifer will live in the house where she grew up, where she was happy. That's where she belongs. That's where her happiness is. It is necessary to pause life, to take time out, to be alone with herself and her thoughts. A measured, unhurried reality, silence, no hurry and no fuss. It seemed to Jennifer that all of this would help her to recover, to regain her composure and peace of mind. And now Jennifer sits on her suitcases waiting for the gazelle. This is the apartment she's been renting for years. She came here as a naive student, full of plans for a happy, bright life. She leaves as what? A successful, wealthy woman or an unhappy one? Lonely and disappointed in life? Jennifer didn't know how to answer that question herself. Her father's house greeted Jennifer with boarded shutters and an oppressive silence. It had been a long time since she'd been here. She missed it. She looked at the cobweb-covered corners of the rooms, remembered how clean and cozy it was. She sat in the deserted kitchen on a hard, cold stool, and in front of her mother's eyes stood New Year's Eve at a large table filled with all sorts of food. Parents, neighbors, relatives. The kids shuttled from the nursery to the kitchen. They liked to see their parents so cheerful, dressed up, happy. It was sad to see the house quiet, deserted, unkept. Jennifer got up, took a broom in her hands, and went into the hay to start cleaning. The girl decided to start there. Almost 24 hours Jennifer cleaned. The house became cozier, brighter, and at the same time warmer in her soul. She was finally convinced that it was the right decision to leave the city and return to Sosnovka. It was quiet and cozy here. Over the years of living with her parents, the house was imbued with a special, unique atmosphere. Wiping the dust off the shelves, Jennifer suddenly realized that she wouldn't sell it for any money. On the other hand, who would want an old country house? Still, Jennifer wouldn't even put it on the market. He's like a friend or a relative already. Over the course of the 24 hours, Jennifer has had several old-timer neighbors stop by. First, Aunt Chelsea stopped by. Jennifer noticed that her neighbor had grown older and faded in the years they hadn't seen each other. She was gray and dull. Where was her former bright and flashy beauty? When Jennifer was a little girl, Aunt Chelsea wore a long black braid and painted her lips with scarlet lipstick. "Hello, sweetheart, are you here?" Jennifer's neighbor smiled. It was nice to see that face from the past. "I'm here," Jennifer replied. "Not selling the house, are you?" "I'm just cleaning up, looking around." "No, I'm going to live here." "You're not." Aunt Chelsea shook her hands in surprise. "No way. I thought people said you were doing well in the city." "I can understand Grace moving back. She's impoverished beyond belief. It's tough with the kids in the city all by herself. So she moved back to her parents' house." "What's your problem?" "I thought people said you had a good job. Did they fire you?" "No, the job hasn't gone away." "No, I'm going to telecommute from home." "That's what a lot of people are doing now." And I know that Chelsea said knowledgeably. "A lot of people telecommute now. Still, it's better for young people in the city, so many prospects, so few people come back. What happened to you?" "No, Auntie, I just wanted to go home," Jennifer replied sincerely. All right, have a rest. What's it like at home?" "At home, the walls help. I'll bring you some lunch, or you can come over. You've got a lot of cleaning to do, no time for cooking." "Thank you very much," Jennifer smiled. And suddenly she felt so warmed by the thoughtfulness of it. It felt so good to be remembered and known here. Jennifer didn't want to disappoint Aunt Chelsea by telling her that she'd already ordered food from the city. Yes, there were now couriers to the outlying neighborhoods delivering food. True, it was a big order, and it didn't come cheap. But now Jennifer didn't have to worry about little things like that. Then Uncle Brandon, an old friend of her late father's, came by. He'd recently been widowed. You could tell the man was still reeling from the loss. They sat and talked, and again from talking to an old acquaintance who had known her as a little girl, Jennifer felt warmer in her soul. Slowly the girl settled in her home, got used to the fact that in the evening from work here does not come Daddy, and Mom does not rattle in the kitchen pots. Jennifer felt like she'd made peace with their loss years ago. But it wasn't like that in this house. It was as if she'd gone back in time to a carefree, happy childhood. And that time, as well as this place, was firmly associated with her parents. So she had to get used to the idea that they were gone. Jennifer worked from home. On Mondays, she would go into the city to pick up paperwork, then process it all week, and bring it back on Friday night. Her schedule was calm, measured. Usually the girl coped with the planned amount of paperwork for the first half of the day. Then Jennifer had time for the garden. Suddenly she loved to tinker in the soil. She enjoyed tending the beds, growing unusual varieties of flowers, decorating the plot with lanterns, figures of gnomes and frogs. Jennifer also read, a lot, sitting in the garden in a big soft armchair that she had brought here from the living room. She had never had time for that before. Now there was, and Jennifer was eager to make up for lost time, devouring one after another of the books she had long wanted to read. And bad weather was no obstacle to reading outdoors. If it was cold, she simply dressed warmly and put on a blanket. If it was raining, Jennifer opened a wide beach umbrella over the chair and enjoyed reading to the sound of drops on the brightly colored dome. Jennifer chatted with the neighbor's Aunt Chelsea, Uncle Brandon, Grandma Samantha. There were hardly any young people left here. The village was slowly but surely dying out, sad. All of Jennifer's old acquaintances, her former classmates and high school buddies, had gone to the city. There were a few guys who drank heavily and had no aspirations. Even Grace, the one who, according to Aunt Chelsea, had given birth to a baby by someone she didn't know and returned to her parents with her brood. Even she had gone to work. She'd left her children with her mother and father and had gone to Los Angeles to build her career and personal life. They talked occasionally when Grace came to visit her children and parents. Jennifer remembered her as a pretty little girl, big eyes and a trusting gaze. Now she was a grown woman, a mother of 3. "I don't understand you," Grace wondered sincerely. "How can you voluntarily imprison yourself in this wilderness? I can't even stand it for a week. I want to go to the city. There is life there. There are beautiful houses and streets. So much fun, just to walk along the embankment. It lifts my spirits. This place is a shithole." Jennifer just shook her head. She couldn't explain to Grace how good it felt to be in the middle of nowhere after the city, where she didn't want to talk to people who saw her as a cash cow. Jennifer didn't want to be alone in a crowd again, hoping and being disappointed, always in a hurry, trusting and being deceived. She was seriously considering getting a cow, or at least a goat. It would be nice to have a living creature in the house, and such a useful one at that. Jennifer had a cat, of course. It came to her one day, as if it sensed the landlady needed it. "Are you lost, poor thing?" the girl asked and gave it milk. Mirka stayed. From a skinny creature, this cat turned into a fluffy peach-colored beauty. During the day she walked somewhere or slept on the street. But at night she came to Jennifer and curled up in her bed. The girl joked sometimes that Mirka guarded her sleep. And maybe it was really so. Dreams in the village were good. Jennifer seemed to feel peaceful, happy. And yet there was something missing. More like someone. Mirka is good, of course. She's a great listener. Only trouble is, you can't get an answer out of her. And in general, it's so great to be loved and cared for by someone, like all those brutal, handsome men in the movies and TV series, which Jennifer had been watching a lot lately. It's just a pity that all this doesn't really happen. Love, devotion, tenderness between people. Jennifer was not a little girl. She had seen and experienced a lot of things. She no longer believed in pure, bright love. Sometimes she wished she could. One day, towards evening, Jennifer was tending to her vegetable garden. It was the beginning of fall. It was a wonderful time, her favorite time of the year, when the heat was no longer patronizing, but the first frosts were far away. And nature was blooming with some fantastic colors, and the air smelled of wildflowers and watermelons for some reason. The evenings were already quite fresh, so Jennifer wrapped herself in her mother's warm sweater. Her hair was mussed, and she wore work galoshes on her feet. After all, she was going to the vegetable garden, not the catwalk. Another advantage of living in the countryside: no makeup, no hairstyling, no need to look flawless. But on this particular night, Jennifer would have preferred to be dressed more respectably. "Jennifer, you look beautiful," came a pleasant male voice from behind the fence. Jennifer thought about it, her mind drifting off, as it often did now. And then there was this response. The girl slowly turned around and met her eyes with the man whom she had considered the ideal man all her childhood and youth. Although he was not a man then, of course he was not yet, he had not come out in years. In front of Jennifer stood Tom, the one whom all the neighbors set as an example to their children. All grown up, tanned and smiling. Jennifer recognized him immediately, even though she hadn't seen the neighbor's son in over 10 years. How could you forget someone who had been the object of your dreams for so long? She could still remember her heart pounding at the sight of his bright blue t-shirt, flashing in the distance. Then the shirt had burned out, faded. But Jennifer still saw it from afar and hurried to that spot to catch a glimpse of Tom. Maybe even to say hello to him, to have a few words with him. Tom was like a heaven to her then. So handsome, so smart, and very confident in himself and his actions. Never had a word in his pocket. Always knew what to say and who to say it to. Tom went to the big city after school, went to university, and became a pediatric surgeon. That's what the neighbors said. He never came back to his home village. Tom's parents themselves went to visit their son and then moved to the city. The neighbors said that Tom bought his mother and father an apartment near his home. How lucky the Clarks are, the men said. The son has grown up to be a respected rich man, a professor, a doctor, and attentive to his elders. This Tom should now be in a big city and lead an active life of a successful man. How did Tom end up in this village? Here, near her fence, whoever, but him Jennifer certainly didn't expect to see. It was a fantastic moment, almost like meeting a miracle. Jennifer smiled, desperately hoping she hadn't gotten herself dirty, as she sometimes did. "You haven't changed much," Tom said as he approached the fence. Jennifer stepped closer to his companion as well. "You'll say the same," the girl smiled coquettishly. She knew she looked younger than her years. "Why are you here?" "I heard that your parents..." "Sorry to remind you." "Yeah, my parents are gone," Jennifer nodded. "I came here to live, to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, to think about life." "I can understand that. Sometimes you wish you could run away to a desert island. Except my patients need me, and that's the only thing stopping me." "You're a surgeon, I hear." "A pediatric heart surgeon," Tom clarified. Jennifer involuntarily looked at his fingers. Slender, long, aristocratic fingers. You'd never guess that Tom had grown up in the countryside, and with those very hands he chopped wood, milked cows, and carried heavy weights along with the other village kids. "I'm a lawyer. I work remotely so I can afford to live here. So how do you like this life? Are you happy with it?" Tom looked Jennifer carefully in the eyes, and she simply could not lie in response. "Well, not everything, of course. Why are we standing here? Why don't you come in if you're not in a hurry? We'll sit on the veranda. I'll give you some tea with raspberry leaves. I thought you liked that when you were a kid." "I guess I still do," Tom smiled. He walked through the wicket Jennifer had opened. He hadn't drunk it for a long time and had forgotten the taste. They sat on the veranda under a rapidly changing sky. Jennifer turned on the lantern. Gnats and moths danced their eternal dances in its light. One by one, large bright stars lit up, the kind you could only see in the countryside. Jennifer wanted it to last as long as possible, for Tom to sit like this, talking in his sweet voice. He was so like family. Jennifer hadn't realized her childhood feelings were still alive. Maybe the only reason things didn't work out with other men was because she unconsciously compared them to Tom, and the comparison was certainly not in their favor. There were waves of warmth and acceptance coming from Tom. Jennifer could physically feel that he, too, was enjoying sitting with her on this veranda and talking to her as if they hadn't been apart for years. "You know," the man confessed, "you're the only person in the village who's ever been interesting to me. You were always so thoughtful and understanding." "I'm glad to hear that," Jennifer said sincerely. Tom talked about himself. He lived in the city. He spent most of his time working, teaching students, and studying. Yes, Tom was always learning something new, improving his skills, practicing with experienced professors and surgeons. The young man managed to achieve a lot. He already had a reputation as a doctor to whom appointments are booked months in advance. Tom coped with the most difficult cases. Moreover, he specifically sought out such patients. He liked a challenge. When Tom talked about his work, his eyes lit up and Jennifer smiled. It was obvious that he really enjoyed what he was doing. Tom had found his way, found his place in life. He had come to the village to finally sell the house. He should have done it a long time ago, but his parents didn't agree. It's like a memory to them, I guess. Well, I can understand them. They've spent their whole life here. "Tell me about yourself." "There's not much to tell," Jennifer shrugged. Her own existence seemed gray, uninteresting, almost meaningless against the backdrop of Tom's life. Jennifer lived and worked in the city, tired. "So I came here to rest and regain my strength," she said. "You're here alone? So you don't have any children?" Tom asked and was immediately embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry, I guess it was a tactless question." No, Jennifer smiled. On the contrary, it was somehow nice that Tom was interested in her personal life. "You're right. No kids, no husband. I'm alone." "Well, what are your years?" The man smiled. "I'm alone, too. I just recently ended a very strange and difficult relationship. Now I don't feel lonely. I feel rather free, or even liberated." The confession pleased Jennifer. The girl, of course, tried not to give herself away. She even had to avert her eyes so that Tom would not notice the impression his words had made on her. Jennifer realized at once what was going on, guessed by some inner instinct. The fortune teller's prophecy came back to her mind that true love would soon come her way. Her heart told her that this time disappointment would not follow. Everything would definitely be right now. Good, okay. Just the way it should be. Olivia froze in the doorway. In the hallway stood another woman's boots, and from the bedroom came suspicious sounds. A banal situation, described by many TV series and book stories. Except Olivia never thought something like this could happen to her. On woozy legs, she walked to the bedroom and opened the door. She wasn't wrong. Ryan, her common-law husband, was entertaining a long-legged girl with a mop of red hair in their bed. A lump immediately formed in her throat, risking a desperate sob. But Olivia decided she wouldn't give these two the pleasure of seeing her tears. She turned around and walked out, slamming the door shut. As she ran out of the driveway, she gulped in air, breathing hard and trying to calm herself down. But it wasn't working. Tears burned the skin on her face. "How could he?" she asked aloud. Some passerby even turned around, thinking the question was directed at him. But Olivia walked quickly away from the house she'd long considered her own. "I'll pick up my stuff tomorrow or another day," she pondered, calming down a little. Though somewhere in there, on a subconscious level, she already knew that she would never return from there again. Tucked into a warm scarf, the girl hurried to the nearest cafe as a snowstorm was beginning to fall outside. There were dark clouds, and the wind was so penetrating that it chilled her to the bone. When she entered the cafe, Olivia was horrified to find her purse missing. All she could scrape together in her pocket was a coffee. No money, now without the man she loved. Sad, she thought, taking a sip of flavored coffee. It was good that she slipped her cell phone into her pocket, or she would have been left without communication. When she managed to warm up at least a little, the waiter announced that the cafe would be closing soon. Olivia shivered, looking out the window. The blizzard was in full swing. It had been a particularly snowy and frosty winter this year. She couldn't go home. She didn't want to look at the man who had betrayed her, who had trampled on her feelings. In addition to the phone in her pocket was a bunch of keys, one of which was from the door of her office. A plan of action was outlined. So Olivia hurried to her hometown publishing house. where she had worked for several years. "Who's there?" an elderly security guard asked. "It's me, Olivia." "I'm sorry, old man. I didn't recognize you," she replied. "What brings you here at this late hour?" "Uncle Adrian, can I sleep in the study?" Olivia asked in a voice shaking from the cold. Adrian had worked as a security guard at their publishing house for several years. He was a kind and jolly old man. All the employees loved him very much and called him just Uncle Adrian. "Oh my God, of course it's Olivia," he fussed. "How can I leave you out in the cold? Come in. I'll put the kettle on, you're shivering. You could get sick." Olivia opened her office, took off her down jacket and took a cup of herbal tea, carefully brewed by the guard. She valued her job very much. Ryan was part owner of this newsroom. Who owned the other share, she didn't know. Ryan didn't like to talk about such topics. He'd only once mentioned that he'd opened it with a friend who'd sold his share to a big businessman. But Ryan was the only one who actually ran the publishing house. Olivia, who had graduated from journalism school, joined Ryan's staff. Later, she even became editor-in-chief. She managed to quickly gain authority and universal respect among colleagues, because often had to take on the responsibilities of Ryan, and not only him. She was always trying to help her husband. And although Ryan hadn't proposed to her, she sincerely considered them a family. And a stamp in her passport was a mere formality. "That's it, Olivia. It's over. The man you thought was the love of your life turned out to be a scoundrel and a traitor," she said out loud and laughed nervously. The image of the betrayal kept flashing before her eyes. After locking herself in, Olivia finally let her feelings out. After crying all night, she didn't sleep a wink. It wasn't until morning that she dozed off in her desk chair. She woke up to a noise in the waiting room. "Open up, Olivia. Open up," Ryan shouted, pounding on the door with all his might. Her heart raced in her chest. She didn't want to open it, but she knew she had to. Olivia opened the door and turned back to the window. Ryan walked into the office without closing the door, even though the employees were coming to work at that time. "Why didn't you stay home last night?" Ryan asked. Olivia stared out the window in silence. She was afraid he would see her tears. Well, no, and they won't give him that much pleasure, Olivia thought to herself, clenching her fists with all her might so that her nails dug into her skin. Olivia turned, trying to look at Ryan with a nonchalant look. "I didn't mean to distract you, Ryan, from important business," she replied. Ryan stared defiantly into her eyes, but what struck Olivia was the complete lack of remorse or guilt in his gaze. On the contrary, he smirked cheekily. "Don't get all hot and bothered, chick. I'm a man, a male, so I can't wait for you to make time for me. You're tired, or you're working or something. What am I supposed to do? Are you saying it's my fault you brought some girl into our house?" Olivia found it hard to breathe. She'd assumed anything, but for him to turn it around like this was too much. She decided to end the conversation and tried to leave, but Ryan literally pushed her into the wall. "Where are you going? Do you really think I'm just going to let you go?" he asked defiantly. "Let go, Ryan. It's over. I don't want to see you anymore." Olivia tried to free herself from the man's strong grip, but she couldn't. "Have you been thinking straight, Lucky?" Ryan asked with anger in his voice. "You're worthless without me. Remember the mess I got you out of. Do you want to go back to the swamp you grew up in before you met me? Without me, no one will give you a job in this town." Olivia was silent, trying not to cry. Yes, she had no family at all. Ryan was the only person Olivia considered close to her at the moment. Her parents had been gone when she was very young. She was raised by her grandmother, who also passed away not too long ago. He knows how hard she's been taking the loss, and now he's hitting the hurt. "It's too bad that in so many years I didn't see you for who you are," Olivia said. When she felt him loosen his grip, she broke free and ran away, unable to hold back her sobs. There was a huge black void in her soul that made her feel hopeless. After running a decent distance away from the publishing house, Olivia stopped. Thoughts were jumbled in her head how to live now and what to do. She didn't know. She didn't know. She couldn't go back to the way things were. and she had to move out of Ryan's apartment. God, how could he? There was only one question swirling around in the girl's head. The thought of inevitably having to go back to the apartment to get her things was frightening. What if she met him there again? That was the last thing she wanted in the world. Sighing heavily, she wiped away her tears and walked slowly along the streets of stores and cafes. She decided to come back for her things later, when she had calmed down a bit. Olivia tried to rethink her life. Where had she gone wrong? Why had Ryan started cheating on her? After all, he loved her. She could feel it. It was true that he had changed a lot lately. He was often irritable, rude, and constantly late for work. Now she realized that it was probably during this period that he had taken a mistress, maybe even more than one. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about it while she'd been doing her best to help Ryan with his work and support him. He'd been having affairs with other girls and then coming home and getting into bed with Olivia, as if nothing had happened. As she approached the flower store, Olivia froze for a moment, watching the men pick out flowers. This store was high-end, one of the best flower stores in town. Looking at her reflection in the window, Olivia smiled sadly. Staring back at her was a sad girl with eyes faded and swollen with tears and smeared mascara. Turning away from the window, she quickly walked away, immersed in her sad thoughts and not looking around her. Just at that moment, a man came out of the store with a huge basket of white roses. Without looking, Olivia flew into him with all the speed she could muster. Some of the flowers scattered and she fell. "You should watch where you're going," the man shouted at her. But he gave her a hand to help her up. And at that moment, when he touched her hand, something happened to Olivia that she'd been trying to forget all her life since she was a little girl. Her lungs burned, her head spun, and her chest felt like it was on fire. She couldn't get up. Her body felt like absorbent cotton, and her arms and legs were unsteady. Only in her mind, one image replaced another. Olivia saw the man standing next to her, burning in flames in a black car with license plate 545. It's like the flames are eating him up. He's screaming uncontrollably. As if feeling all of his pain on herself, the girl lost consciousness. When she woke up, the first thing she saw was the troubled face of the man from her vision. "God, you scared me. God, you scared me. Do you need to go to the hospital? Let's call a cab," the man smiled amiably. "I'd drive you myself, but I can't. I'm in a hurry." And he took out his cell phone to dial a cab. "Please stay home tomorrow." "You're in danger," Olivia whispered. "You must have hit your head, and you still need to see a doctor," the stranger said. "No, I'm fine." Olivia stood up and realized she was on a bench at the bus stop. "Probably when I passed out, he carried me here," the girl thought. The man shrugged and walked toward a black car with license plate 545 parked on the curb. "Wait," Olivia shouted and rushed toward him. The man turned around, looking at the girl running toward him. "I realize you're probably going to think I'm crazy, but I'm asking you to listen to me. There is no way you are going anywhere in that car tomorrow. I implore you, please. Or your life will be in danger," Olivia wailed, grabbing his arm. The man smiled, clearly confused by what he was hearing. "Would you go home, young lady? Are you really shocked?" He turned and got into the car. Olivia sighed heavily. He didn't believe it. Of course she would have thought she was crazy too if she hadn't known about her gift. Trying to get her thoughts in order, she wandered toward Ryan's house. She had to get her things. Olivia had a small apartment on the edge of town that she rented out to tenants. She decided to call them and let them know that she needed a place to stay. Of course, she was sorry to kick people out who were also very decent. After all, they had been renting the apartment for a long time and had paid for it faithfully, keeping it in perfect order. But nothing could be done. She herself has to live somewhere. Having called the tenants and warned them, the girl hurried to get her things. The tenants tearfully asked for time to move. They had recently had a baby in their family. They even offered to pay a month in advance. After thinking about it, Olivia couldn't refuse them. And the extra money was a good thing right now. The closer she got to the house she'd been living in for the past few years, the heavier she felt. When she reached the door, Olivia tried to gather her thoughts, afraid of catching Ryan at home, or, even worse, alone with her mistress. But when she inserted her keys into the door lock, she was stunned to see that the key was spinning, and wouldn't open the door. I even had to check the correctness of the chosen key. There was no doubt. It was the right key. It didn't fit. Olivia sat down on the steps and cried quietly. Ryan had already changed the locks. Why would he do that? After all, she hadn't cheated on him, he had. The girl sat like that on the steps until late at night, waiting for Ryan, but he never showed up at home. Olivia wondered what she should do and where she should go. Sure, she had an old house in the country outside of town where her grandmother had lived. But it was quite dilapidated even at that time, because her grandmother had saved all her savings to buy her only granddaughter an apartment in the city. What happened to it now? Olivia hadn't been there since her grandmother died. After thinking for a moment, she decided to go to work. After all, Adrian was on shift again today. He wouldn't leave her on the street. When she got to the publisher's office, Olivia realized she was falling off her feet. She knocked. There was the sound of the door opening. Olivia, I was told not to let you in here anymore. You'll have to excuse me, old man. Ryan ordered it, Adrian said in a guilty voice as he walked out the door. It's been like that since you left. He went off the rails, yelling at everyone. He told me to look for your replacement. But it's going to be hard for him to replace you. You've been pulling 3 jobs, Olivia asked with trembling lips. The guard sighed heavily. I don't know what happened between you two, but I can't leave you out in the cold. Come on in. You'll spend the night in my den. We'll decide what to do in the morning. Thank you, Uncle Adrian, Olivia said, sobbing. Her head was pounding, her heart aching with injustice. But as soon as her head hit the pillow, she fell asleep. Olivia woke up when the sun was shining, and there was a murmur of voices. She quickly cleaned herself up and headed for her office. To her surprise, it was open. Olivia hurriedly gathered her things, of which there were plenty. Most importantly, her laptop. Hastily throwing everything into her bag, she headed for the door. That's when Ryan burst into the office. What are you doing here? Who the hell let you in here? You were fired yesterday, he whispered. Don't worry, I came to get my things and get my paycheck. Don't worry anymore, Olivia replied. The man standing in front of her now vaguely resembled the man she loved. Get out, but put your stuff back, Ryan shouted. Curious people started peering into the office, but it didn't embarrass him in the slightest. But this is my personal stuff. And the laptop is mine too. Are you out of your mind, Ryan? Olivia replied, clutching the bag to her. At that moment, a furious Ryan raised his hand to hit her, but the receptionist stopped him in his tracks. Ryan, the CEO is in the office waiting for you, she said. You're lucky. Now get out, he yelled. I don't know why you're acting like this. Apparently it's payback for my loyalty and love for you. Just know that no one canceled the boomerang, and all the evil that you have caused me will definitely return to you. You'll see. Olivia said loudly and ran out of the office, wiping away her tears. Charlie, I'm so sick of this. I feel like I'm suffocating with hopelessness, Charlie said, sitting in the big leather chair across from his friend Stephen. Buddy, don't exaggerate. You're the envy of the world. Stable business, income. The best girls. Your Sue is a beauty, you can't take your eyes off her, Stephen said, smiling. But I haven't enjoyed it for a long time. I want a real, sincere relationship. And all these girls, including Sue, are only interested in the size of my wallet. Charlie looked out the window thoughtfully. Well, just the size of your wallet. Stephen laughed. You were in great demand at school because you were always considered handsome. Charlie stood up and walked over to the huge panoramic window in his office. Yes, it's true. He was always in demand with the female sex, and when the money came in, doubly so. The office of his firm was located in the largest business center, and the windows had a magnificent view. That was a prerequisite. Charlie was a true romantic at heart. True, he had to hide this feeling far away, so as not to be considered a weakling. After all, in business it's important to have grip, style, and toughness. Charlie owned a large media holding, which included the largest publishing houses and even a couple of television channels. I met a strange girl today when I was buying flowers for Sue, he said quietly, staring off into the distance. Was the girl so good that she blew your mind? Stephen asked with a smile. That's not the point. I didn't even get a good look at her. But I can't get enough of what she said. She begged me not to get in the car tomorrow. She said I was in danger. Stephen laughed. Sounds like the dudes are really bad. You believe in fortune tellers now? And gypsies too? We have to go to an important negotiation tomorrow. Have you forgotten? Yeah, I remember everything Charlie said. By the way, we have to stop by that publishing house we bought 2 years ago. They're complaining about him, the manager says. He's out of control. There's a rumor that he's embezzling money. We need to get to the bottom of this. The friends said goodbye, and Charlie drove home. Sue met him on the doorstep. She threw herself around his neck and said sweetly, "You're finally home. I missed you so much. I've been thinking about you all day." And she hung around Charlie's neck and kissed him. "Sue, stop it. I'm actually tired." Charlie pulled away from her. "You're such a bore. Why did I fall in love with you?" Sue pouted playfully. "Did you?" Charlie asked, looking her in the eye. "What do you mean by that?" Sue started to get angry, and without an answer she continued, "You're always dissatisfied, always tired, as if you were some old man." Charlie went to his room, but before he got there he turned around and said, "Well, I'm not keeping anybody. If you're not satisfied, you know the way out, don't you?" When the door slammed behind the man, Sue was already complaining to her father on the phone. Charlie lay motionless on his bed and thought about his life. For some reason, he remembered his childhood, when he and his mother had lived together. It was probably the best time of his life. They lived in a provincial town, far from the bustling metropolis. His father left to conquer Chicago in order to earn money, but never returned. Mom worried a lot, but her son was able to bring up a real man. When Charlie graduated from school, his father suddenly appeared and offered his son to move to the city to study, promising to provide a good job at the end. As Charlie later realized, the father had already started another family. It did not work out. There were no more children. So the parent remembered about his own son. By this time, his father was not a poor man, so he wanted to involve his only son in his affairs. Charlie didn't want to leave his mother alone, and his resentment toward his father was great. But his mother insisted he go. Finally, the young man gave in. After studying at university, he went to work for his father. And as soon as a little on his feet, he hurriedly separated from him and opened his own business, which flourished every day. Sue was introduced to them by her father. The girl was the daughter of a former prosecutor, and although the family was short of money after retirement, they had a lot of connections. "Son, you can't go wrong with a hottie like Sue. The girl's the first beauty. Plus, she really likes you. And her father's connections will open doors for us." Charlie was enthusiastically urged by his father. And indeed, everything was going well at first, until Charlie began to notice that he was only acting in the role of sponsor. That there was nothing in common between them was needless to say. Everything was clear. His friends raved about Sue's beauty, but that didn't make him feel any better. Recently, she began to hint that it would be time to legalize the relationship, and his parents were pushing from both sides. Charlie was still hesitant to propose. Lately, he was leaning more and more toward the idea of breaking up. Suddenly, the image of the girl he'd met this morning came to mind. And for some reason, that memory brought a smile to his face. Taking out his cell phone, Charlie called Stephen. "Hey buddy, help me out. I'm going to my mom's. I've already made arrangements for today. I can't. I'm suffocating in my own house. Help me out." "Go to the meeting for me tomorrow," Charlie said. "Oh man, you're a piece of work. You've gotten so depressed." Stephen laughed into the phone. "But what am I going to drive? You know my car's in the shop after the accident." "No problem. Take mine. I'm going to take a cab to my mom's. I haven't been to her place in a long time, and I'm really looking forward to it." When Sue found out Charlie was going to his mother's, she made a disgruntled face. "I thought we were going to a club to unwind." "What are you doing in the middle of nowhere?" she asked. "This backwater, as you put it, is my hometown, the place where I was born, and with which I have many wonderful memories. It's also where the closest person to me lives, Charlie answered. Maybe you'll take me too. I'll finally get to know your mother. We're about to get married, and we don't know each other. Sue made her usual resentful face. No, go out with your friends. I want to be alone, Charlie said, turning away and dialing for a cab. He knew that his mother wouldn't like a girl like Sue. She was a sensitive person, and she would know at once that there were no real feelings between young people. She'd always taught him to marry for love only. Sue fought a little longer, but without her fiancé's approval, she went off to the club. Charlie, remembering that he was going to visit one of his publishers, decided to go there. Early in the morning, he could not sleep for a long time. His thoughts were confused, and something was weighing on his mind. It seemed as if his whole life was going down the drain. Yes, he had no problems with money, but that was not enough. He just needed someone who would sincerely love and support him, and whom he would love. Once he tried to talk to his father on this subject, but his father only laughed. Son, leave such nonsense to the foolish poor. In our world, only the right calculations bring happiness, said his father. But didn't you and mother love each other? Charlie wondered. We did, and you see where it led. Domesticity quickly ruined everything, he said. As I recall, it was you who ruined everything and left us for a lucrative party, Charlie grinned. And as you see, it's been good for all of us. If I hadn't left, we'd still be living in poverty in the hole we were in. And now, thanks to me, you're a successful businessman with everything you want. My father stood up, walked silently across the room, and raised his eyebrows. Don't tell me you regret it. Only foolish weaklings would say that, not my son, he said. Charlie struggled to keep from being rude to his father. He clenched his fists in anger, but he managed to restrain himself. He really didn't want to look weak in his father's eyes. All his life he had tried to prove to him that he could grow up to be a decent man without him. So he worked his ass off to build his own business and separate himself from his father. Yeah, the head start his parents gave him was priceless. That's why Charlie kept his mouth shut. That conversation had come up many times in Charlie's mind. Now, when he couldn't sleep at all, it came to mind. It wasn't until dawn that he was able to fall asleep, and soon the alarm clock rang. Remembering that he'd promised his friend he'd give his car to him, Charlie hailed a cab. 40 minutes later, he was already entering one of his editorial offices. But as soon as he entered, he heard screaming, and a crying girl ran past him, nearly knocking him down. In her, he recognized his recent acquaintance. The girl, on the other hand, didn't even look at him. What's going on here? He asked the receptionist. The girl looked around, fearing they were being overheard, and replied, Oh, Charlie, there's something going on here. Ryan fired Cheryl, and she was the one who kept everything going. She's a great person, and most importantly, she's honest and helpful. And Ryan is... The secretary's a little hesitant. The staff dislikes him, you know. She waited for a reaction to her revelation, but Charlie didn't say anything, deciding to deal with Ryan as soon as possible. He didn't wait long. He came running a few minutes later. Charlie stared at the man. What is it, Ryan? They made you editorial director. There's a lot of complaints about you, Charlie began. I don't know who told you the gossip, but we're doing fine here. And those who are spreading false information are probably either competitors or fired employees with grievances, Ryan said, looking at the general. That's right. Your staff turnover has been off the charts lately. Can you tell me what that's about? Charlie asked. The man sitting across from him was starting to annoy him. How to filter out the poor quality employees. We only select excellent people, Ryan answered quickly. I noticed that. Anyway, starting tomorrow, there's going to be an unscheduled audit at the publishing house, Charlie said. You can go, you're free to go. The man left quickly, but Charlie could see that he was tense. After making a couple of calls to the central office, Charlie ordered the best specialist to be sent to the publishing house. Before he left, he requested the file on the wrongfully fired Olivia from Human Resources. Charlie took a cab to his mother's house. He thoughtfully stopped at the store and bought everything he needed, and the anticipation of seeing his mother made his heart warm and happy. The The place where Charlie had spent his childhood and youth had not changed a bit since his last visit. Unfortunately, he didn't get there often enough to keep up with his busy schedule. After paying the cab driver, Charlie stood for a moment in front of the same 5-story building he'd grown up in. More than once he'd asked his mother to move in with him or buy an apartment in a newer, more modern building, but she'd always refused. Breathing in the scent of the frosty day, Charlie smiled and walked into the entryway. Cheryl wasn't expecting to see her son, but was very happy to see him arrive. "Son, are you okay?" she asked her son cautiously and hugged him on the doorstep. "Yes, I'm fine," Mom Charlie answered one-wordedly. "It's just that you usually give me a heads up." "No, it's not that I'm glad to see you, it's just that you seem upset about something. Tired of the hustle and bustle of the city. You want to go home? I haven't seen you in a while and I miss you," Charlie smiled childishly. Cheryl didn't question her son, though she could see that he was obviously puzzled about something. That night, for the first time in a long time, Charlie fell into a deep, restful sleep and slept until almost lunchtime the next day, having turned off his cell phone. When he turned it back on, the messages poured in, as if he'd been out of touch for a month. "Call me back right away." There were at least a dozen such messages from Stephen's friend. Among them were messages from Sue, but it was decided to deal with them later. Business was more important. Stephen immediately answered the call. "Where have you been?" It's just this. I thought something had happened to you. You've got everyone on edge," Stephen yelled into the phone. "Wait, what happened?" Charlie wondered. It turned out that Charlie's car had been in an accident and could not be repaired. In the evening, going to do business instead of Charlie, Stephen remembered that he had forgotten important documents in the office, so he asked the driver to go and get them. But he got into a terrible accident in which he died. According to the preliminary version, the car was damaged brakes and gas tank. The car burst into flames. "It wasn't an accident," the guys said. Stephen continued. "You and I were lucky. Too bad about the driver. He was a young guy who'd just gotten a job." Charlie quickly jumped up and started for home. "Son, how come you're leaving already?" "You're leaving already?" "I haven't had a chance to talk to you yet," Cheryl said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I have to go. Mom, I'm sorry, I'll be back soon, don't worry." Charlie kissed his mother and ran to the cab. 3 days later, the official examination confirmed the speculation. Olivia had received a very small amount in the cash register, even though her salary wasn't that high relative to her employment and responsibilities. She had never asked Ryan to give her a raise. It was embarrassing in front of the staff, since everyone knew they lived together. It seemed to Olivia that by doing so, she was making a significant contribution to the overall family business. She loved her job very much. It was a shame no one ever appreciated it. At 2 on the cold train, time seemed endless, getting off at the right station. Olivia was being blown through the wind. It was a long walk. Calling a cab was useless. No car would go into the village in this weather. Pulling up her scarf and shoving her hands in her pockets, she followed the barely visible path. She was almost exhausted when the familiar village showed itself. Just a little longer, Olivia thought to herself, gathering her strength. Suddenly, she thought she heard a strange sound nearby. Olivia looked around and noticed a human figure lying in the snow. Cautiously approaching, she heard a man muttering. "What's wrong? Are you ill?" the girl wailed. The man said something, but Olivia couldn't make it out. Taking her cell phone out of her purse, she shined the light on his face. Paul. Oh my God, what happened? She recognized the man lying in the snow as her classmate who lived not far from her. They had been very friendly as children, and in their youth Paul had even confessed his love to her. After the grandmother reported that the guy went down a crooked path, began to drink. Now she realized that the guy was dead drunk. She couldn't leave him lying there. He'd just freeze to death in a blizzard like this. She didn't know who to call, and her phone was practically dead. Olivia looked toward the village. It wasn't far away. She couldn't get the man up. Tearing some bags and tying them together, the girl turned Paul over and laid him on top of the bags. That way there was at least some sliding in the snow. She just couldn't do it any other way. Her strength was leaving her. and her hands were starting to freeze without gloves. But after a couple hours, she was still able to drag him home. Knocked on the window of a neighboring house. Olivia saw Emily, his elderly mother. Together they carried him into the house. The woman thanked Olivia at length, trying to persuade her to stay the night. But Olivia hurried back to the house. The shriveled gate, the peeling paint, all told that the house was uninhabited. When she found the key in a secret place, Olivia sighed in relief. They always left it there with her grandmother. The house was cold and damp, and one window appeared to be broken. There wasn't much firewood up the stairs, but there should be enough for a few days. Olivia quickly stoked the stove and went looking for something to fix the window. There was nothing in the back room except a piece of old linoleum. Deciding to make do with it for now, the girl began to work. After a while, the heat from the stove gradually filled the house. Olivia lay down on the bed and fell asleep. She woke up to an unbearable pain in her hands. They were an unnatural color. Olivia realized she had gotten frostbite. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Emily stood on the doorstep with a basket in her hands. Olivia, hello, Olivia. I'm sorry, old girl, I didn't get a chance to thank you last night until I put this one to bed. Did you run away already? I couldn't leave him out in the cold. Olivia smiled, embarrassed. You can come in, but I don't have anything to buy you. I'll go to the store today. To get some provisions? Yeah. Chiara, the clerk, won't open the store in this weather. The porch is snowed in, and there's no one to clean it. I've brought you some goodies. There's chicken, homemade eggs, milk, and cottage cheese. I've also brought you some herbal remedies. Let's have some tea. And the old woman put the basket on the table. Olivia took out the gifts and thanked her neighbor. Still, the world is not without good people, she thought to herself. What brings you here, little girl? And what brings you here, and even in such bad weather? Your grandmother told me that you've settled down in town. Are you well? Emily asked. It's just the way things are, Olivia sighed. She didn't want to give any details. After she said goodbye to her neighbor, Olivia started cleaning and making dinner. The house was already warm enough. In the old trunk, among the many things, she found her old tracksuit that her grandmother had brought her. Her grandmother always put things in the trunk, repeating that everything in life could come in handy. How right was she? Remembering her grandmother brought tears to Olivia's eyes. It was as if she knew everything in advance. There was a reason why she was treated warily in the village, but at the same time she was respected. No one knew about her gift. Only her granddaughter. The rest of us could only guess. Her arms ached more and more, and her throat began to ache. In the evening, she began to feel feverish. There were no medicines in the house, only a decoction of herbs brought by a neighbor and some jam saved. Waking up in the morning, Olivia realized that she was even worse. There was almost no strength, the fever did not fall. The girl periodically fell into a dream. She dreamed of her grandmother and the carefree time they lived together. Her parents had died when Olivia was almost 7. The bus taking them to work had overturned and fallen into a ravine. Everyone survived except Olivia's parents. It was as if her grandmother had known in advance that this would happen. As an adult, Olivia once asked her why she didn't talk them out of going if she knew everything. It is not in my power to decide the fate of people, grandmother answered. We can't escape fate, no matter how bitter we are. Since then, they lived alone with their grandmother. The old woman took care of her granddaughter as best she could. She even managed to buy a small apartment in the city for her. The girl adored her grandmother, trying to help her in everything. Olivia learned about the fact that she also received her gift from her grandmother a little later, in adolescence. Visions were rare, but very frightened the girl. Olivia felt that everything was burning, but there was almost no strength to get out of bed. There was a knock on the door. Olivia tried to tear her head off the pillow, thinking that whoever was behind the door would definitely help her. The girl gathered the last of her strength and slowly made her way to the front door. The knocking was repeated. But opening the door, Olivia still could not see the guest, having lost consciousness. There were no numbers on the houses, nor were there any street names. Charlie had almost given up hope of finding his recent acquaintance, Olivia. He knocked on one of the few houses with a light on, hoping to find out something about her. The elderly woman who opened the door let him in, I only know of one girl named Olivia that you might be looking for, the old woman replied. It's mostly old people and people like my son. The woman nodded at the man snoring loudly on the bed. The smell of booze in the room spoke for itself. Olivia saved my father from starvation the other day. Dragged him on her back when she found him in a snowdrift. Please thank her again for me, please. I can't walk myself. I've been sick for 3 days. It's hard to get up. Now Charlie knew the direction in which to go. When he found the right house, he noticed that the door was covered with snow, and only the slightly dimmed light of the lamp showed that there were people in the house. No one answered the knock. It took more than one knock before Charlie heard footsteps. But the girl who had opened the door fell senseless. Charlie managed to pick her up and carried her into the house and carried her to the bed. The girl's face was dead pale. Her whole appearance suggested that she needed to go to the hospital immediately. Charlie dismissed the idea of an ambulance, for it would not be likely to get over such a rough road. So he decided to drive her himself. The SUV he'd borrowed from his father could easily overcome any snowdrift. Charlie wrapped Olivia in warm blankets. He gently placed her in the back seat of the car and drove to the hospital. At the same time, he called a doctor he knew and received instructions from him. Charlie carried Olivia into the emergency room in his arms. The doctors were waiting for them. Separate room, medication, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it. I'm asking you to help her, Charlie asked. Don't worry. It's our duty. The doctor replied and slipped the bill he had received from Charlie into his pocket. The girl was taken away, and Charlie was told that he would be informed of her condition as soon as the picture was clear. All the way home, Charlie thought of her. Not every girl would risk her health to save some alcoholic, he thought to himself. Amazing, touching, and so defenseless. That's exactly how she seemed to me, even though I didn't know her at all. Olivia. When she opened her eyes, Olivia couldn't realize where she was. It was only after a while that she realized it was a hospital. The room was modern, well-maintained, the kind she'd only seen in movies. Her hands were fully bandaged, and a vein was filled with medicine from a nearby IV. How she had gotten here was unclear. The nurse who entered smiled affectionately. Come to your senses at last. Now I'll call the doctor. With these words, she hurried out the door. The doctor examined Olivia for a long time, asking many questions about her well-being. Of particular concern were the girl's hands. Well, Olivia, the condition has been stabilized. The pneumonia has been stopped with medication. Of course, while you need to be under observation until the full recovery of the body. Rest, the doctor finished and left. Olivia stayed in the room with the nurse who was changing the drugs in the drip. Your husband is a good man. He brought you in his arms, raised the whole staff. He got you expensive drugs. Any woman would envy you. Besides, such a handsome man. Oh, sorry, the nurse faltered, seeing the serious look of the patient. Husband, you say? Olivia didn't understand what was happening. Recent events had been erased from her memory. It was hard to believe that Ryan could take care of her, especially after what had happened between them. But then who? The next couple days went the same way as the previous one's procedures, injections, medications. Only the young nurse periodically brought gifts given by her husband. Each time she spoke admiringly of him. Olivia was dozing when Charlie entered the room. She had looked different in 2 days, her cheeks flushed, and her breathing was even and calm. Charlie had learned from the doctor that the girl's hands were badly injured and required long treatment. During these days, he had managed to learn a great deal about her. He had studied her files, taken from the personnel department in the newsroom, and talked to her co-workers. He wanted to touch her hand, but was afraid to scare her. Olivia felt his presence and slowly opened her eyes. She whispered. Hi, I'm Charlie. We never got to meet, then he smiled. I'm sorry if I offended you. I'm sorry if I offended you. I'm sorry I said a lot of crazy things. You probably thought I was crazy, didn't you? Olivia said. That's the thing, no. I owe you one. You saved my life, you might say. I never believed in such things, but your words made me give up the trip. Your sincerity and persistence touched me. Thank you. Olivia was silent, unable to cope with the emotion, her breath hitching in her chest. His touch was like an electric shock. It was like something she'd only experienced when she'd learned about her abilities as a distant child. Olivia remembered how scared she'd been then. Her grandmother had calmed her down. She felt dizzy and slowly sank down onto the pillow. "You'd better rest for now and take it easy," Charlie said thoughtfully. "Do you want me to read to you?" he asked suddenly. Olivia nodded. The man sat down on the edge of the bed, pulled out a book, and began to read. Olivia didn't listen to the text, but his voice was so pleasant that it was hypnotizing. She kept silent, trying to get a glimpse of her interlocutor. Today he looked different from his first meeting. Then he was wearing a suit and a strict coat. Now he was wearing blue jeans and an ordinary sweatshirt. His hair was dark, medium length, neatly styled up. Charlie was smoothly shaved. The scent of his perfume was faint but very pleasant. Charlie came in every day. At first the conversations were few words and a little stilted, but in time they began to chat like longtime acquaintances. Common interests, views on life, sense of humor, and of course working in the same field did the trick. "How did you find me then?" she asked him one evening when Charlie was always around. He grinned. "It's a long story. I had to meet your former principal and get your address." "You talked to Ryan?" Olivia wondered. "Yes." Charlie immediately changed the subject, so they never returned to the conversation. "Olivia, good morning," she heard the doctor's voice. "I must tell you that tomorrow you will be discharged. The tests came back quite good. We'll give you a referral for further treatment at another clinic. Unfortunately, your hands aren't healing as fast as we'd hoped." The doctor said some more things, wrote some recommendations on a sheet of paper, promising to give all the other papers tomorrow at discharge, and left. The news of her imminent discharge, oddly enough, upset Olivia. She didn't want to go home. With sore hands, it was scary to get on with her life. Olivia realized she couldn't do it. There was no money to continue treatment at the clinic the doctor had mentioned today. The treatment she was receiving now, as she realized from the nurse's words, had been paid for by Charlie. This evening was the first time he had not come to see her. Olivia waited until after dark, but in vain. Sleep didn't come either. All sorts of thoughts popped into her head. After spending almost the whole night without sleep, in the early morning Olivia gathered her few belongings and went to the doctor's office to get her discharge papers. After picking up the discharge papers, the girl slowly made her way towards the exit. "Thank God, I thought I was late," Olivia heard a familiar voice close by. Charlie was standing next to a bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry I couldn't make it yesterday. I got caught up in the moment. I had a lot of important things to take care of." "Sit down. We need to talk." Charlie offered to come into the hospital cafe and talk. Olivia almost threw herself into his arms when she met him. She'd never expected to see him again. When Charlie invited her to a table, he was slow to start a conversation. It was obvious that he was worried. "I talked to the doctor," Charlie began. "He told me that you need further treatment. And it's pretty serious. I don't think you should go back to that house in the village. It's practically uninhabitable. Getting from there to the city for treatments is unrealistic. And how are you going to support yourself at home?" Charlie paused. "I have an apartment in the city," the girl said quietly. "I know that too. I know that too. And I know you're unemployed because of Ryan." The man was clearly tense. "I have a business proposition for you," Charlie finally said. "I'm offering you a job and a place in my house." When he said that, he looked at her questioningly. "What kind of work?" "I don't really understand," Olivia said, confused. Her mind was a mess. "Olivia, you're an excellent specialist in your field. I'm sorry, but I had to do some research. I have a very interesting project in mind, but I need the help of someone I can trust. That person is you. I have confidence in you, and you have the experience I need. So far, only a very small circle of people know about it. We'll discuss the details a little later." Charlie covered the girl's hand with his own. "I have a big house. You'll have your own room and workspace. We'll go to the necessary procedures, so you'll get well sooner." He looked into her eyes. "Think about it, because it's the best way out of this situation." I don't know. Olivia looked into his blue eyes and couldn't understand what was happening to her. After a brief pause, she finally decided to answer. I agree. She thought to herself, whatever happens. She didn't want to break up with Charlie, after all. He smiled and exhaled a sigh of relief. Charlie nodded, and they headed toward the parked car. It wasn't a Jeep, but a dark blue executive sedan. I've decided to change my image, Charlie laughed, seeing the question in his companion's eyes. It was a long way to their destination. All the way they talked casually, laughing and joking. But the closer they got, the more serious Charlie became. Finally, he stopped the car at the entrance to a private village. Olivia, there's something else I'd like to tell you. Charlie paused. Sue, my girlfriend, lives in the house besides me. That information hit Olivia like a cold shower. A lump formed in her throat and tears welled up in her eyes. I understand, Olivia said in a shaky voice. Don't worry, Sue doesn't know anything about work, so no one will interfere with your work. Olivia nodded silently and turned away from the window. Of course, she suspected that a man like Charlie was hardly alone, but deep down she hoped he was. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Charlie parked in front of a large mansion. He took the girl's things and gestured for her to follow him. The inside of the house was even larger than the outside, but to Olivia's surprise, the dwelling was quite cozy. She'd always thought such huge houses were like museums, devoid of coziness. But she seemed to be wrong here. They were greeted by a staff of 3, a female cook, a maid, and an elderly male manager. Your nurse will arrive closer to evening and bring everything you need for your treatment. Make yourself comfortable for now. Charlie smiled and walked out. Olivia sat down on the edge of the huge bed and sighed heavily. The room was decorated in light beige colors and tasteful furnishings. It had a shower, a toilet, and access to the balcony. Olivia also found a door leading to a small office that had everything she needed for work. The girl looked at her belongings, of which there were very few. Putting on her home kit, Olivia decided that she needed to pick up her things from Ryan tomorrow. But how to do that, she didn't understand yet. Toward evening, a nurse actually came to see her, treated her hands, and gave her the necessary medication. It was obvious that the woman was a professional. She was also very pleasant to talk to, which Olivia was now sorely lacking. When she heard a knock on the door, Olivia flinched. It was the manager, whose name was Vic. The man invited her to come down to the dining room for dinner. Olivia put on her house slippers and followed him. She was really hungry, so she didn't linger at the set table. Charlie was waiting for her. He smiled welcomingly, indicating the seat across from him. Can you forgive me? He asked. For what? Olivia didn't understand. For almost starving you, Charlie laughed. It's good for a girl to go on a diet, Olivia said. You don't need to do that. Charlie winked merrily, glancing at Olivia's figure. I see you're having fun, they heard a woman's voice say. A girl was coming down the stairs, walking toward the dinner table. The cheerful mood quickly faded away. The girl came up to Charlie and kissed him. Hello, darling. I didn't realize we had company. Why don't you explain? She asked defiantly. Yes, this is Olivia, my personal assistant. She'll be living in this house for the time being because of circumstances. And this is Sue, he said to the guest. But Olivia seemed frozen in place. She looked at Sue and couldn't believe her eyes. She had bright red hair and looked just like the girl she'd caught Ryan with. Are you going to drag all the female employees into our house now? Or is this one special? Sue asked cheekily. My house, you mean? Charlie replied calmly. Olivia saved my life, so I owe her a favor. Would that be a good explanation? I'm sorry, I think I'll go to my room. I don't feel well. Olivia was heading for her room when she heard Sue's words. God, Charlie, are you crazy? Look at her. What helper? Is that better in funny pajamas? Sue laughed nastily. Olivia didn't hear the rest of the conversation. Her heart was racing. Maybe she was wrong about Sue. Maybe there were lots of girls with hair like that, and her imagination was running wild. A little later, Olivia had dinner brought to her room. It was late afternoon. She soon realized that she would like some tea. It was a habit she had had for a long time. She liked to drink tea before going to bed. They always did that with her grandmother, making delicious tea and having conversations. The only difference was that now Olivia was in someone else's house. Opening the door, the girl went in search of the kitchen. There was a dim light on in the house. That meant that everyone had probably gone to their rooms. Finding the kitchen, Olivia made herself some tea. There was a huge fireplace in the living room. The view from the window was breathtaking. Without turning on the light, she went to the window. The huge windowsill was just right. Olivia made herself comfortable on it and began to enjoy her tea. She thought of her grandmother at times like this, of the first time she'd met Ryan and how she disliked him. "He's not your man. Ryan's rotten inside, you know. Crying here with him," Grandma said. But Olivia, head over heels in love, didn't want to hear it. Ryan seemed like a prince from a fairy tale, her first love. After graduation, Olivia moved into his apartment. After renting out his one bedroom, Ryan got her a job in his newsroom, making her practically his right-hand man. As Olivia later realized, it was only that he shoved almost all of his supervisory duties onto her, taking advantage of her dependability and work ethic. And so it was. Olivia adored her job, doing Ryan's errands by day, and could spend nights writing articles and editing, fully immersed in her favorite business. To her, an inexperienced girl, such a family life seemed perfect. Immersed in her thoughts, Olivia didn't immediately notice the footsteps. "I'm not interrupting," she heard Charlie's voice close by. He was standing there with a cup of flavored drink in his hands. He was wearing a housecoat, his wet, mussed hair suggesting that he'd recently showered. She'd never seen him like this before. The man sat down next to her. "I can't sleep either," he said. "I like to sit in silence with a cup of tea before I go to bed, to think, to dream." "Me, too," Olivia sighed. "I also like to look at the night sky, at the stars. Evenings like that inspire me to do something new." Charlie smiled. "You're an amazing girl, Olivia. I've never met anyone like you before. Tell me, how did you know I was in danger?" Olivia had been expecting to hear that question for a long time. "I don't know how I did it. My grandmother had the gift of foresight, or something like that. I guess I got it from her. But it was very rare, just a few times. She always said my visions were life-changing. That's it. There's no other explanation." "Thank you," Charlie whispered, staring intently at Olivia. The silence lengthened. "I think it's time to go to bed," Olivia smiled. "Are you trying to lighten the mood?" Charlie grinned. "Yeah, sure. Get some rest. Did you have a hard day?" Charlie said goodnight, but stayed in the living room. Charlie sat in a comfortable leather armchair in his office, drinking flavored coffee. Opposite him sat Stephen. "I don't understand why you brought her home." "Naturally, Sue is against it. It's normal," Stephen lectured. "Is it normal to help people, especially when you're in their debt?" Charlie replied thoughtfully, savoring his coffee. "How long have you been a philanthropist?" "I've never seen you do that before." "Wait a minute, maybe you liked that girl." Stephen laughed. "She's not a girl, but a very decent girl. Let's finish our conversation." "I'm very busy," Charlie gestured toward the door. When he was finally alone in the office, he thought. On the desk in the most prominent place was a photo frame of him and Sue together. They had been together for several years, but had never really become close, it seemed to Charlie. Yes, certainly Sue was a bright and showy girl, but... The cell phone lying nearby beeped. It was a message from Sue, reminding him of tonight's trip to the theater. In the hustle and bustle of the last few days, he had completely forgotten about it. He didn't want to go, but when he imagined how Sue was going to kick his ass after he said no, he decided to go. Olivia woke up as the sun came up. Her arms ached, but not as badly as before. When she went to the window, she saw Charlie heading toward his new car. He was wearing a business suit today, just like when she'd first seen him. As if sensing her gaze, he turned around and looked at her through the window. Olivia smiled embarrassedly and waved at him. The man waved back and got into the car. Today, Olivia decided to familiarize herself with the front of the upcoming work. But first it was worth a shower and breakfast. When she came downstairs, she found Sue sitting at the table. "God, you again," she heard herself say. "Darling," she turned to Olivia. "This is the dining area for the owners of the house, not the staff. Charlie's got you on loan to help with his work. So please eat breakfast with the staff and don't spoil people's appetites." Sue looked at the girl in silence. She had little doubt now that she was the one she had seen in Ryan's apartment. "What? Did I not make myself clear?" Sue shouted. "Sorry, I really should go," Olivia replied quietly, going into the kitchen. The cook made coffee and gave her some sandwiches. The girl took it all to her room, figuring she'd eat breakfast there. The residue of seeing Charlie's fiancé was not pleasant. But by immersing herself in her work, Olivia was able to distract herself from her thoughts. A knock on the door interrupted her. A maid brought in a huge bag and set it by the bed. "There you go," she said cheerfully and quickly disappeared out the door. The bags contained Olivia's things. But how? How had they gotten in here? After all, they were all at Ryan's house. Mentally, she had already said goodbye to them, deciding to buy her own things gradually. As she was going through her things, happy as a child, the phone rang. "Hi," she heard a familiar voice. "I hope all the things are there." "Hi. How did you do that?" "Nothing. I just called your former boss and offered to get all your stuff ready. Otherwise, he promised to fire me," Charlie said cheerfully. "Thank you." Olivia pictured Ryan's face at that moment and smiled too. Charlie wished her a good day and passed out. The girl put all the things on the shelves and continued working. She took her eyes off the monitor screen only when it started to get dark outside, and voices were heard downstairs. When she looked out the window, she saw Charlie walking out with his fiancée. Sue was dressed in a beautiful evening gown and her head was adorned with an elaborate hairdo. From the outside, the couple seemed just perfect. Two beautiful, successful young people. Olivia couldn't take her eyes off them. Charlie carefully placed his companion in the car without looking out the window, where a pair of attentive eyes were staring back at him. Her stomach reminded her that she didn't mind getting a refresher, since lunch had been skipped. So Olivia went down to the kitchen. Maid Jenny and cook Ciara, whom everyone in the house called Aunt Ciara, were already eating dinner. When they saw Olivia, they invited her to the table. "The master wanted me to tell you to be ready to go to the doctor's tomorrow morning," Jenny said. Olivia nodded. "An aromatic piece of chicken. Aunt Ciara, you're the queen of the kitchen. You've got to make something so delicious," she complimented the cook. "Oh, Olivia, thank you, my dear, for your praise. But not everyone is so happy," the woman grinned bitterly. "The owner's fiancé has been nagging me," Jenny explained. "The soup's not right, the food's too plain, too unadorned, or something else. And she's been giving me a hard time about breakfast. I don't know what to make." When the owner lived alone, he was always happy with everything, Aunt Ciara concluded. And when that witch came into the house, no one is happy. Jenny sighed heavily. "Listen," Olivia the cook said to her. "I've got this recipe for a delicious cold cake. The girls at work kept asking me to make it. I think it would be perfect for breakfast. I can share the recipe," she smiled. "It would be my pleasure, Aunt Ciara." Olivia cheered. After a little more chatting in the kitchen, Olivia went back to her room. Charlie and Sue came home at midnight. Olivia couldn't sleep, she was absorbed in her work, so she heard the sound of a car pull up. That Sue was cheating on Charlie was understandable. Except Olivia decided not to tell anyone about it. It was someone else's relationship, and she wasn't usually in the habit of prying, though she had a keen sense of justice. She'd been tempted to do it, but she'd stopped herself in time. Getting up early, Olivia got ready for her scheduled doctor's appointment. After applying discreet makeup and styling her long hair, she wore classic pants and a blouse, not forgetting her heels. There wasn't much time left, so she hurried to the kitchen so she could eat breakfast and help Aunt Ciara as she had promised the day before. Olivia did her job quickly, and it wasn't long before there was a full bowl of flavorful pancakes with her signature fruit sauce on the table. Now that everything was ready, she savored the flavored coffee, glancing at her watch, afraid to keep the driver waiting for her. Charlie showered, dressed, and went down to the living room, where Sue was waiting for him at the table. His head ached terribly. Last night had not brought the desired pleasure. Lately, going out with Sue had been stressing him out. They rarely ate breakfast together, so he was surprised. Surprised? "What made you get up so early?" Charlie asked. "I figured we didn't spend much time together, and eating together would bring us closer together. Besides, we're going to have to do it all the time after we get married," Sue said. The word "have to" hurt her ears. Charlie sighed heavily. "That's beer, coffee, and chewing horse. Where's Olivia? Why isn't she at breakfast? As far as I know, she should be up by now at this hour," Charlie asked. "Don't you think servants shouldn't be at the table with us?" Sue looked at her fiancé defiantly. "She's not a maid. I thought I told you she saved my life. So she's a guest in my house. And now I have to put up with this mongrel next to me. Have you seen the stupid pajamas she wears? How redneck do you have to be to come down to dinner in your pajamas in a decent house?" "Yes, I told her to eat with the servants and not to interfere with us," Sue shouted, unable to stop herself. That's right, Charlie pounded the table for the first time and raised his voice. "In this house, as long as I'm the boss, I'm the only one who decides who sits at the table with me. And if you don't like someone else's company, eat somewhere else." Charlie got up and went into the kitchen. He found Olivia in the kitchen, chatting sweetly with the maid and laughing merrily. He stood in the doorway for a second. Olivia looked different today. Strict pants and blouse emphasized the advantages of her figure, and makeup and styling made the image unusually gentle. "Olivia," Charlie called out to her. "Come on, we have to go. Today I'll take you to the clinic myself." The girl followed him in surprise. Sue, still sitting at the table, looked at the transformed Olivia with surprise and anger. "You look great." Charlie complimented her as they got into the car. Olivia smiled silently. It took them almost an hour to get to the clinic, and then they waited for the right doctor. When the doctor examined the girl, they were both quite tired and hungry. "You see, the doctor said that the wounds will soon be completely healed and you'll be able to live like you used to," Charlie said cheerfully. "Yes, thank you very much. If it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have happened to me," Olivia sighed. "Let's not talk about it. I'm just repaying your kindness for your kindness. Now let's go out to lunch, or we could starve to death," Charlie joked. They settled down at a cafe nearby. Charlie ordered a full multi-course meal, while Olivia had a light salad and juice. "So that's why you're so tiny." Charlie laughed, comparing their portions. Lunch turned to conversation and discussion of work-related matters. Both of them acted relaxed and easygoing. "What a strange thing to say. We haven't known each other very long, but I feel like I've known you all my life," Charlie said suddenly, putting his hand over her arm and looking into her eyes. "It's as if fate had sent you to me to give me something light in my life." "Why do you say that? You're a successful businessman. You have everything?" Olivia wondered, her voice trembling, her heart beating so loudly that it sounded like everyone in the cafe needed to hear it. Charlie sighed heavily. "Let's go. I need to show you something." When they arrived, Olivia marveled at the huge office building with its many adjoining structures. It felt like they were in a mini-city. "Do you like it?" Charlie smiled. "Yes. But I don't really understand what I'm doing now, which I got with the help of my father. And of course, he never misses an opportunity to remind me of that. Yes, I'm very grateful to him for the start in my career that he gave me. But, I want to prove to everyone, to him, and first of all to myself, that I am worth something. I've been thinking for a long time and decided to realize my media project. I want to launch several TV channels, an advertising agency, and a publishing house. I have a lot of ideas, and I want you to help me. No one knows about this but you. I want to keep it a secret. At least for now." "You mean Sue doesn't know either?" Olivia asked, stunned. "No, why not? You two are getting married, aren't you?" Olivia asked. "Sue is far away from all this. She thinks money falls out of the sky," Charlie replied briefly. They stayed there for a while, looking around and making plans for where everything would be. They didn't get home until after dinner. Sue, watching them from the window, was literally choking with anger. Everything was falling apart. Charlie had grown cold to her, and everything was going so well. Sue ran out as soon as Charlie and Olivia entered the house. She threw herself at him and snuggled into his arms. "I've missed you so much. I haven't had dinner without you. I'll get the table set up. Olivia, I hope you'll join us." "I think I'd rather eat in the kitchen," Olivia said. "Please join us for dinner?" Charlie asked. Olivia nodded, unable to refuse. Changing into her favorite pajamas, Olivia went downstairs for dinner. Everyone was already at the table, waiting for her. Sue glanced at her guest and tried to suppress a laugh, but it didn't go unnoticed. The servants set the table. "Jenny, I'd like for breakfast tomorrow those wonderful pancakes we had this morning. They remind me of the flavor of my childhood," Charlie said with a smile. "Charlie, I'd love to. Except I didn't make them," Olivia did, the cook said. He looked at Olivia, surprised. "For all your virtues, you are a great cook." He praised her. Olivia smiled, embarrassed. "You're exaggerating. It's just that we never had servants. My grandmother and I used to bake something for tea. I love the smell of baking in the house. I think it adds to the coziness and warmth of the soul." "I didn't like the pancakes at all. Very greasy. I can't imagine how many calories they have. I wish you'd cut down on the baking, or Olivia would turn into a fat duck," Sue said sarcastically. The servants went to the kitchen, and those at the table at last began to eat, continuing their conversation. Olivia ate in silence, while Charlie and Sue carried on a conversation. "Olivia, where did you buy those ridiculous pajamas? Every time I see you in them, I can't help laughing." Sue laughed unpleasantly. "It was given to me by a very nice man, so it's precious to me. Unlike you, I was born into a simple family where comfort was valued more than showy outfits and pathos," Olivia said. "If you'll excuse me, I think I'll go. I'm a little tired." Olivia walked out and headed back to her room. "Why do you keep picking on her? Why don't you get tired of it?" Charlie asked. "I was just asking. I can't stand the whole hillbilly thing." "Yeah? Did you happen to forget that I'm from the country too? Are you making fun of me?" Charlie raised his voice. "Vera has an excellent education, excellent work experience, and a sympathetic heart. What can you do? Maybe you want to trade me for that provincial girl. I wondered what you brought her here for." "It's all clear now," Sue said. "I hope you don't regret it." With that, Sue left the table. Charlie couldn't sleep. Tonight he went to bed in the living room. Olivia wouldn't get out of his mind. It was easy and comfortable with her. He could be himself. He was also insanely attracted to her. They'd spent a lot of time together the last few days. He'd probably realized that she wasn't just a random person in his life. Charlie woke up this morning with a heavy head. There was a call from his father, who asked for a meeting in a disgruntled voice. It was going to be a busy day. Lately, communication with his father did not arouse positive emotions. There were only reproaches and complaints. That's why Charlie decided to start his own business and start from scratch. But no one could know about it yet, except Olivia. She was the only one he could trust. Lately, this girl seemed to him a ray of light in his gray, as it seemed to him, life. They were spending more and more time together. And every day Charlie realized that this girl attracted him more and more. Her simplicity and spontaneity combined with her enormous efficiency amazed him. She was so involved in the new project that she was literally breathing on it, offering many interesting ideas. After a quick coffee, Charlie went to his father's office. The huge building in the center of the city stood out favorably against the background of other business centers. His father liked everything ostentatious, unlike his son, who, no matter how hard he tried, liked simplicity in everything. "What's the emergency?" Charlie asked, stepping into the spacious office. "I won't beat around the bush. I'll get right to the point. Sue called me yesterday," complaining. Charlie paused and looked at his son questioningly. "Ah, that's it." Charlie grinned. "And you decided to act as a peacemaker from the province. Am I right?" "Don't exaggerate. I care about your fate. If you're doing something stupid, who's going to guide you but your own father? Don't you think the time for parenting is long past? I don't think so. Am I not the little boy you abandoned who needed you the most at the time? I'm old enough now to handle my own personal affairs, Charlie replied irritably. Don't be silly, son. Sue's perfect for you. And her father's connections will open a lot of doors for us. Besides, the girl's head over heels in love with you. What more do you want? And what's this about some tramp you brought into the house? Charlie stared into his father's eyes and said, barely able to keep from shouting, that's right, not a tramp, but a very clever and decent girl, to whom you all have yet to grow up, and who to bring into my house is for me to decide. He stood up and headed for the exit, turning around at the door. I hope we understand each other. Saying this, he left his father's office. I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't want to see anyone. Almost no one. Getting into the car, he drove to the place where he planned to organize his new project. Olivia was there, working hard. The girl was enthusiastic. Charlie saw her leaning over the papers and admired her. Surprisingly, she was the only person he felt comfortable around, especially lately. After pouring 2 cups of coffee, Charlie knocked on the door. Can we not knock? You're the boss. Olivia smiled. You were so enthusiastic. I didn't mean to scare you. Besides, you were so quick to get to work that now I think you're in charge. Not me, Charlie laughed. After they drank coffee, they began to discuss the work. Olivia announced that she'd found some great people, including some from her last job. Plus, she'd arranged a meeting with the company that made the equipment they needed. I've also designed the office space and prepared some sketches for you to look at. Olivia held out a folder. You're a miracle. God sent you to me. Charlie walked over to Olivia and took her hands in his. She didn't say anything. He didn't take his eyes off her lips. The urge to kiss was so strong that he barely held back, afraid of the reaction. Suddenly, the phone in his pocket rang loudly. Charlie picked it up, stepping back to the window. Olivia realized from the pale face and the worry in his voice that something was wrong. Mom's in trouble. The hospital called, and we need to go right away, Charlie said. Of course, if you need help. Olivia couldn't finish her sentence. I'd like you to be there for me, please. Charlie took her hand. She nodded and followed him, grabbing her outerwear. It took them quite a long time to reach their destination. Even though winter was coming to an end, the weather was truly wintry. Heavy snowfall was literally covering the road, paralyzing traffic in some areas. Charlie's phone rang several times, but he repeatedly rejected the call. Pulling up to the hospital almost at night, they went straight to the attending physician, who reported a heart attack in Charlie's mother. After describing the situation, the doctor authorized a visit in the morning since the woman was conscious. There's no point in going back. The roads are completely snowed over, Charlie said to his companion. We'll spend the night at Mom's apartment. If you don't mind, of course. Olivia didn't mind. She couldn't imagine her life without the man's presence. Strangely, not so long ago she'd thought she loved Ryan. Now she tried to keep thoughts of Charlie out of her mind because he had a fiancée. But it wasn't working. When he was near her or touched her, every cell in her body responded. She loved everything about him, his velvety, low voice, his scent, his smile, and his eyes. Olivia hadn't experienced that with Ryan. She liked him, of course, but she'd never felt such an incredible attraction, not even at the beginning of their relationship. And what was there to compare it to for the naive girl she'd been when she'd met Ryan? She'd never had a serious relationship before him. There was a convenience store in the building where Charlie's mother's apartment was, and they stopped in to get some food. The small apartment was unusually cozy and clean. Olivia noticed it at once. Charlie immediately changed into his homemade clothes, which suited him perfectly. A simple t-shirt and shorts looked good on his figure. Olivia admired him twice, trying not to give herself away, though her heart was ready to jump out of her chest every minute. The apartment was full of pictures of Charlie at different times in his life. As Olivia settled into the apartment, he began to prepare a simple dinner. Charlie, would you mind if I took a shower? Olivia asked hesitantly. Sure, the bathroom's over there, Charlie said. But I don't have a change of clothes. I don't think anything from Mom's closet would fit me, Olivia said, even more embarrassed. Maybe my t-shirt will come in handy. You're so petite, it would be like a dress, he smiled. While Olivia was in the shower, she got even more excited when she imagined that they would have to spend the night in the same apartment. What am I thinking? I'm already living in his house, even though it's full of people, and here we're all alone, she thought to herself. When Olivia finally appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing Charlie's t-shirt and a towel on her head, dinner was ready. Charlie froze when he saw Olivia, who had just come out of the shower. You look good in my clothes, he said at last, not taking his eyes off her. It smells really good, she said, trying to lighten the mood. I'm not sure it's edible, but we have no choice, Charlie smiled. Surprisingly, it was delicious. During dinner, the tension eased a little. Charlie talked about the years he'd spent living in that apartment with his mother. For some reason, he wanted to talk about his difficult relationship with his father and his childhood resentments. Olivia listened attentively, not interrupting. Charlie was showing her a different side of himself now. After dinner, Charlie showed her the photo albums, telling her the stories behind each picture. You were lucky to have had a wonderful childhood and a wonderful mother, Olivia said, thinking. Take care of her. Family and loved ones are the most precious things a person has. I would give a lot to have my loved ones near me, but unfortunately it's impossible. A tear rolled down her cheek. Charlie touched Olivia's cheek and wiped the tear away. How defenseless was she at that moment? He wanted to hold her close to him and keep her safe. Instead, Charlie leaned down and kissed her. The kiss was filled with a tenderness and passion that both of them struggled to handle. Olivia responded to the kiss. The whole world seemed to freeze at that moment. Charlie picked the girl up in his arms and carried her to his room, never stopping kissing her. Laying her gently on the bed, he asked, "Are you sure you want to do this? One word from you and I'll stop." His husky voice was driving her crazy. She gently ran her arms around his neck, and without answering anything, she kissed him. This night was theirs alone, and no one else's. And the closeness was more than just physical. It was as if soul mates were joined at the hip. Charlie woke up in the morning and looked at Olivia sleeping on his shoulder. She was even more beautiful in her sleep. He hadn't slept much tonight, and he'd been thinking a lot. He had made the decision to break up with Sue. After tonight, it was foolish to continue this already meaningless relationship. He now realized that he had lost his head and could no longer live without Olivia. The phones on the table began to vibrate, trying not to wake Olivia. Charlie walked out into the kitchen, closing the door behind him. But immediately after he left, she opened her eyes. Her mind replayed the events of the night before, and she wanted to scream with happiness. Putting on a t-shirt, she wanted to go out, but the scraps of conversation held her at the door. "Sue, stop it. Mommy's in the hospital. I'll be there tomorrow or in a couple days as soon as her life is out of danger. Oleg disconnected." And Olivia realized with horror that she was just a casual hookup for a man who would soon be married. The morning was a busy one. For breakfast, the young people went to the hospital. Charlie visited the attending physician first, and then they went into the room to see Charlie's mother. The woman was weak, but very happy with her son. And when Olivia decided to leave them alone, the woman said, "You're glowing, son. I'm so glad you finally found love." Charlie held her hand and smiled. They stayed together for 2 more days until the doctor told them that there was no longer any danger to their mother's life. Early in the morning, they arrived home. "I'll talk to Sue tonight and explain that we have to break up," Charlie said as they entered the house. But his fiancée was already waiting for him in the living room. She threw herself into his arms, telling him how much she missed him. Throwing a dismissive glance in Olivia's direction, she kissed a confused Charlie on the lips. Olivia hurried to her room, but soon heard a knock. It was Sue. "You want to take my fiancé away from me?" "No, it's not going to work. You know why? I'm having a baby, our baby, okay? And everything was fine before you came into this house. I think you realize that you're an extra, and you'll make the right conclusions." With these words, Sue left the room, leaving Olivia dumbfounded by the news. 2 hours later, her things were packed and Olivia was waiting for a cab. Suddenly, someone touched her shoulder. Olivia heard a voice unfamiliar to her pain. "Don't say anything, I need to leave." "Sue's right. I'm redundant. And it's best for everyone. A child is sacred. I'll never get over it. Olivia's voice trembled. I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't know, did I? But I want to be with you. Charlie looked into her eyes hopefully. Sorry, I have to go. The cab's waiting. Don't worry, I'm not refusing to be involved in your company. But it's better if we don't see each other. It'll be easier on both of us. Olivia turned away and headed for the cab. Charlie stood there staring at the car that was taking his happiness away. Yes, he could leave Sue, help her and the baby financially. But he realized that Olivia would not support such a decision and would not accept it. Olivia occupied her apartment, which the tenants had vacated the day before. From morning until late evening she spent at work, gradually setting up processes and solving many issues. She worked hard to keep her free time as short as possible. Charlie never stopped thinking about her for a minute. He knew a lot about Olivia from the firm's employees and followed her life. He knew that she was highly respected and valued by all the employees. It couldn't be any other way. Being at home was sometimes unbearable because of the presence of Sue, who was unpleasant to him. It was only the thought of the baby that kept him close to her. They were to be married in the next month. But he tried not to think about that, because every night he dreamed of Olivia, and in those dreams they were happy together. One evening, when he was feeling dreary, Charlie decided to visit Stephen to get his mind off it. The door of the apartment was ajar, so Charlie decided to enter. As he took a step, he heard two men shouting. The voice of one of them was Stephen's, but the other sounded vaguely familiar. "And what are you offering me? If you hadn't been such an idiot, it would have been just as I'd planned to blow up the car. You should have thought of that." Stephen shouted. "What was I supposed to do? You promised me money, and it never came. And then there were all those inspections. He would have gotten to the bottom of it soon enough, and who would have been to blame? You'd be above suspicion, of course. And me? You asked me to wait a little longer. He trusts me 100%, but we had to proceed with caution. And after the incident with the car, he's been watching everything and controlling everything. I had to lay low," the other man said. "Great. And now, after all the checks, they're going to throw me out on the street. Sue left me because I got her pregnant. She said she wasn't going to be with a penniless urchin. And that naive Charlie took her word for it that the baby was his. And with me in love, it's all about money. Anyway, either you pay me right now, or I'm going to go tell him what a good friend he has." Charlie entered the office. Both of them froze in amazement. Stephen's conversation partner was Ryan, Olivia's ex-husband. "I really thought of you as a friend, almost a brother," he said to Stephen. "That's too bad." He'd kicked Sue out the door that night, and in the morning his father had called, threatening to take the company away if he didn't change his mind. "Take it. I'm tired of being controlled by you. I don't want to see you anymore," Charlie told his father. "I'll turn things over to you tomorrow." Charlie disconnected the phone, took the car keys, and drove to an address he'd known for a long time. Olivia opened the door right away. "I'm sorry, I'm a fool. I'm not the one who got Sue pregnant. I can't be without you," Charlie said. Olivia was silent. A tear ran down her cheek.